Council, please come to order. Everyone stand. We'll be led in prayer by Alderman Nash.
Almighty God, we ask for your blessings upon the members of this council as we assemble here in this chamber to conduct the ongoing business of our city. With your guidance, we will strive to ensure that all our decisions are for the common good, and your inspiration will instill respect, compassion, and thoughtfulness in all our deliberations. Give us the strength and wisdom to lead by example as the people's representatives, and that peace and harmony will mark our proceedings and keep us faithful to the trust placed in us by the citizens of our community. Amen.
Amen. Alderman DeLucia, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please remain standing. I'd like to ask for a moment of silence and observance for Mrs. Bonnie Hong, who recently passed away. She previously served as a city council president. In fact, she was the first city council president after a new form of government was instituted here. That was the elections of 1987. She also served on the city council one term. But she continued to serve the city through Rotarian efforts and a number of charitable causes, working with the youth and the Bully Busters and a host of other organizations. She was one of the finest women I've ever known and lived here in the city of Norwich. So I'd ask you to remember her in your thoughts and prayers. Thank you. Thank you. Tonight's council meeting is in compliance with the Governor's Executive Order 7B-1. Thus, the method by which we hear from our citizens is telephonic, and is also the meeting's televised over the public TV access station and online as well. If you wish to address the council during the open general citizen time, the number to call in is 860-215-8140, and when prompted, the conference ID number 403-8191, followed by the pound key. At this time, I would declare citizen comment in general to be open. Again, the number to call in is 860-215-8140, and then when prompted, enter the conference ID 403-8191, followed by the pound key. The lines are open.
Good evening. My name is Marvin Ceruto, 100 Star Street, Norwich, Connecticut, the United States of America. I would also like to extend my thoughts and prayers for Bonnie Hong. Dr. Hong was my primary doctor at the Veterans Administration until he retired. And so I have a very close relationship there. And now, I'm going to give you a blast because we should be meeting face to face. This is ridiculous. It's been a year. I don't see any leadership whatsoever coming out of the city of Norwich. Yesterday was President's Day. You people realize the first president of the United States came out of Norwich, Connecticut. And people don't understand that. And people like to cut me down for that. And I keep having to argue about that. Read the Declaration of Independence, read the Constitution, and it'll be obvious to you. I'd like to know how many of you can raise your hand and say you've read it cover to cover, because I have. And we should be meeting, because this is ridiculous. We've got the Jackie Owens Auditorium, we've got Norwich Tech, We've got Slater Auditorium. We have places that we can meet. I was just at Stop and Shop tonight. I was shoulder to shoulder and heel to heel with people while I'm buying food. And I can't go to a city council meeting? You gotta be kidding me. This is crazy. It's really crazy. And I wanna see some people get some guts and really become leaders in this town, because quite honestly, I'm gonna go out of my way to see that all of you get fired this year, because you don't deserve to be there. My name's Marv Ceruto. I stand on my own 2 feet, and there ain't anybody big enough in this town to knock me off. Bye.
Thank you, sir. The line is still open. The number to call in is 860-215-8140. And when prompted, the conference ID is 403-8191, followed by the pound key. Again, citizen comment general is to have the listener call in and express any issue they care about to share with us. We welcome that. And it's to talk about any local issues you'd like us to be aware of. The number again is 860-215-8140, followed by the conference ID 403-8191 and the pound key. This is our third request.
Brian Colmar, 16 Millsbury Road. I wanted to extend community of course with and I would very much like to see the council do something deeper than a moment to waiver contribution community, which have been bad. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't either.
It's very difficult.
I can understand Marvin though.
I'll have to listen to the tape.
Larry Rice. Will Road, Norwich, Connecticut.
The line is open.
Yes, a couple of weeks ago, I submitted a letter to Mayor Nystrom on an article that was published in the Bulletin on December 14th regarding $2.7 million that was stolen from the Board of Education from people who register their children here in the city of Norwich to go to school here, and they don't live in this town. I would like to know what the city council is doing about this, and the Board of Education members, the city attorney, and Mr. Peckham. I want to know why these people have not been referred for criminal prosecution or for civil prosecution, or why their names have not been published in a newspaper for stealing this money from the Board of Ed. The Board of Ed will be before the City Council very shortly begging for more money in the upcoming budget in July. And I think this is a disgrace that this has not been brought up for further discussion from you people. I'd like to hear comments about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Larry. The line is still open. Again, the number to call in is 860. Again, the number to call in is 860-215-8140. When prompted, the conference ID is 403-8191 and the pound key.
Phone number ending in 6460. Please state your name and address for the record and continue with your comments.
Right.
This is our third and final request for calls. Dialing in at 860-215-8140, and when prompted, enter the conference ID 403-8191 and the pound key. Hearing no other callers, I would declare citizen comment general to be closed. Thank you.
Petitions and communication. Presentation from the McGrath Consulting Group, Inc. regarding the 2020 Fire Study Report.
It would be my request at the end of this presentation that the council move for this report to be referred to our Public Safety Committee, just for the advice of all council members. Gentlemen, Miss, the floor is yours.
I'm attempting to impress you with my technical abilities here.
You have the microphone?
I have. He's got it. Oh, boy. Here we go. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to do it here because I really don't want to put my back to anyone, and I apologize. My name is Dr. Tim McGrath. I'm the CEO of McGrath Consulting. With me tonight is all the members of the team that did the study. We had two other consultants involved. One is our administrative that looks at our reports from an administrative perspective and comments. The other one is a consultant that did some of the phone calling that came in. What I'd like to do is to tell you a little bit about the company. We've been in business 21 years. We're in our 21st year. We have Fire EMS, Human Resources, which is the other Dr. McGrath, which is a subsidiary company that we broke off into a subsidiary company about 13, 14 years ago. And we have a law enforcement division. So publicly, we deal with municipalities from the state level down. We're in 37 states and just ended our 38th last night with Alabama, so we're excited about doing that. This team wasn't put together by error, and I'd like each one of them to go up to the center mic and just very briefly give them the description of your background. The lead consultant was Chief Cleveland. If you want to use a mic up there.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Greg Cleveland. I have been working with the McGrath Consulting Group for about 2.5 years now. I bring about 40 years, just a little over 40 years of fire and EMS experience, both in volunteer, combination, and career departments. I retired about 3 years from the city of La Crosse, Wisconsin, which was 55,000 people, 4 stations. That's probably pretty much about it. I've been involved a lot nationally, and I'm currently serving right now as the executive or the vice president of the NFPA's Fire Service Executive Board from Boston. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Chief Edmonds?
Good evening. I'm Chief Edmonds. I'm right now with the Collinsville Fire Department. I've been in the fire service for about 30 years. I'm due to take a job with Sterling Heights, Michigan coming up, bigger opportunity for me. I really enjoy the consulting work. It gives me an opportunity to stay fresh in the business and to bring ideas to studies and everything. So that's a little bit about me, and thank you for listening tonight.
Chief Street, he started this study as a battalion chief, has just recently been promoted, so he's been a chief for the second week. So congratulations.
I think he handled me, right? All right, thank you for having us, though, to your fine city, and you do really have a fine city. My name is Justin Streed. I was fortunate to serve as a volunteer fire chief for about 7 years and just transitioned to the career chief role in my fire department where I served as battalion chief for. Been in the service for 25 years, loved every minute of it, and I equally loved being able to meet the chiefs that you see back there and just see what your city has to offer. So thanks for having us, and we really look forward to presenting for you tonight.
Dr. McGrath from our subsidiary company, McGrath Human Resource Group.
Good evening again, and nice meeting you all again. Again, thank you and welcome. I am Dr. Victoria McGrath. I'm CEO of McGrath Human Resources Group. As Tim has indicated, we are a subsidiary corporation. We broke off because we do human resources work, compensation studies, performance management, HR audits, employee handbooks, and all that. But we do it for the entire organization, not just police and fire. And people had us pegged into just public safety. So we do everything in all those organizations. I did start out in the private sector, work in banking and healthcare, and then move to the public sector. In addition, I'm an adjunct professor at Northwestern University. I also teach at the Illinois Fire Chief Officer class, teaching human resources to upcoming chiefs. So thank you.
Thank you. My wife says talking about me is my favorite topic, and I know you want to be out of here by midnight, so I'll keep it short. I was an educator that just was raised that you should do something in the community. So they had a volunteer fire department. So I went and I applied. And I was highly qualified because I was male, I was Caucasian, and I was breeding. And sadly, that was a requirement at that time. Thank God we've moved well beyond that with diversity in our services. But I had 30 years in that department, went up through all the ranks. Everybody my age was a first paramedic, so just go with it. We had a visionary mayor that brought in a Six Flags Great America, no shopping center to 2.2 million square feet under one roof, a water park, every feasible chain that you can mention for restaurants. Was an exciting time. The 30 years I was there, we doubled in size twice as an organization. But I was non-union, I wanted that experience, so I became the chief in Wisconsin in a large suburb outside Milwaukee. I'm here. I'm really excited about doing this study. I'm old enough and been in business long enough that I pick and choose the studies I want to do. And I was encouraged by this study. And I had a fantastic team to work with. Now, if this study was about nice people, I could have written it in a week, because you're surrounded by them. You have volunteer career firefighters that are extremely dedicated to what they're doing and serving the community. And we're going to talk about some of the issues that we see and opportunities. But I want to go on record of saying your foundation is great. You've had 6 other studies, And we're giving you a book of opportunities to make some changes that I think will benefit everyone. I have a horse in the race. I came in here with a horse in the race. And I'll tell you and anyone else that asks me that my horse in the race is I won't advance the slide. All right? I told you that I was technologically. Okay, let me jump to this. These are some of the folks that we talked to. We got to speak to all the council members, one by phone, because we didn't connect. We talked to the mayor, the city council manager, the planning, all these folks. We talked to the city police chief, the head of the PSAP. We talked to all the fire department leadership. We opened it up to the members. We talked to organized labor separately. Director of Training and Safety for the city and fire department members, American Ambulance, which is your EMS provider, and the Community Development Corporation, where we asked, what's potentially going to happen out here? There's my horse in the race. What's best for the person that needs the service? That's where we're coming from. I don't know Pete, and I don't know Kevin, and I don't know Kevin used to be married to Sue, who now is dating, and all the things that go on with that. But I do know that every one of you, everyone that's sitting in this room, whether they're career, volunteer, or what, wants what's best for the person. Now what's interesting is the fire service, there's 3 major divisions in the fire service. It's called East Coast, Midwest, and West Coast. And I've worked in all of them. Never the twain shall meet. What's really exciting about the East Coast is the tradition. My father, my grandfather, my uncle, my cousin, all these people have served the community. And they establish a culture. And that's a great thing until the culture begins to drive and might not align with what's best for the person. Yeah, we heard all the stories. Volunteers in the career don't get along. Depending on who you talk to, it's the other person's fault. They didn't call us. They were 22 feet 6 inches out of the district, and they should have called me. They called me, and I had to sit there. They didn't use me, and they called someone else. They disrespected me. You know what? I'm sure everybody's been wronged at some point. But you want to know something? That's not what it's about. It's about that. Because the person that needs your help doesn't care whether you're a volunteer or your career. And don't tell me you have to be professional, because I'll tell you, you don't become professional just because you get a paycheck. You become professional because you care, you're dedicated, you train, and you're willing to sacrifice a lot to serve your community. So one's not better than the other, but they're different. And they're different cultures. And I'm thrilled that the 5 departments, I feel they're the best. They should. But not when we begin to duplicate all the things that you're duplicating. And not to steal thunder from you, but I laid out other studies I've done within the last 2 years of departments that had 6 stations, just like you. One of them is in San Francisco Bay and protects 220,000 people. And they have a heck of a lot less equipment than you have. A heck of a lot less. And they do a really great job. In this report, we wrote about recommended hierarchy. We listed priorities by 1 through 5. 1, we thought it was pretty critical, down to 5 where it's information. You're going to get, and I'll give to the manager tonight, the flash drive that's in there that has the PowerPoint, the report, and all your recommendations in the spreadsheet. So when the Public Safety Committee meets and they go, no, this should be a 2, not a 3. All they got to do is change the number, okay? And they don't have to retype everything or anything else. Those are what we believe. Now, what I love working about this team is, believe me, they aren't just people. Believe me, we had some pretty interesting discussions as we went through, and that's what makes it positive. I think that's why we've been successful, because I've been able to put smart people around me and get the heck out of their way. And they've done a great job. The structure. I know everyone will pick this up and read 193 pages, probably won't go to bed, probably will skip the greatest TV show they ever saw. But just in case they didn't, I wrote an executive summary of short paragraphs of the key points. And then if you want to know how the heck did they come to that decision, go to the appendix and read. And I think we should have articulated it properly enough so that you could do that. Let's see what else I want to say. Okay. There was two major issues that we found. Number one, public safety answering point, dispatch. This is a critical issue and frustration for a lot of people, Kevin's area of expertise. The other major thing we found was how are we going to integrate this together? And I'll talk about that as we go. Bottom one is here.
Good evening, and thank you for letting us present tonight. I'm going to talk about my job was to evaluate the PSAP, and you have a bunch of people working together, making sure you're delivering service to the community, but there's a lot of workarounds that they have to do because of the technology that's in place right now that has allowed it to stay in place. So we're going to talk about one of the main things tonight is firefighter safety. All right, some of the things that are in place that they're working around increases their chances of risk. And we want to eliminate those chances of risk in the fire service. So anything that we can do as a fire service and build systems in place to reduce those risks, we want to take advantage of. So one of the stories that I would like to kind of put on display as to how all these risks come into play is the structure fire that might come in. So as the structure fire comes in, somebody will dial 911 through their cell phone more than likely, because there's not too many landlines anymore. That comes into dispatch, and dispatch will pick up their 911 phone line. They have to let it ring twice, because if they don't let it ring twice, it won't populate the address the very first ring. Then they have to make some critical decisions. They either decide to alert the different fire departments to that structure fire or start entering into their CAD system because the two don't talk together. And that should kind of happen in 2021 rather. Those things should happen. And it's capable. And it's no fault of anybody in this room that that's going on. It's just technology has caught up and we need to take care of it, is what we need to do. So they're making those decisions, getting the people alerted. And without being able to have those times recorded properly, they have issues. All right, the next thing that they have to do is the interoperability, which is Dr. McGrath talked about. And that's the ability to communicate. And what we have found in the city is the police department's on a 7-800 radio system, the career department is on a 155 band radio system, and the volunteers are on a 3356 radio system, and EMS is on a 400 radio system. So it's very difficult for all those agencies to come together without having multiple radios in their vehicles to be able to do that, or patches put somewhere in the system. So that's one of the things that has to change to make that interoperability. So if you have a big fire and you've got people trapped, it's very hard for everybody to communicate. And that's one thing that kind of needs to be fixed. So that's the interoperability with the radio system. The interoperability with the dispatch, as that 911 call comes in, they're making the decisions. If it's for EMS, they're now transferring that EMS call to American Ambulance. They can't just take that information that they've received from that 911 and ship it to their CAD system so they can cut down their responses. So now they're having to ask those questions of that caller, what address you are and verify all that stuff. So that takes up precious time in the system to be able to do that. So we need to be able to put those things together. And the last thing that I talked about, sorry I went too fast, is being able to record all those things is allow you to make data-driven decisions as you go forward. But it's very important to keep track of those times as we go forward so that the resources that are deployed properly, and then it can make those decisions going forward.
Integration. First of all, what Kevin talked about, we're not being critical of dispatchers. They do a fantastic job. And to be a dispatcher is very different from being a firefighter, a paramedic, or a police officer. They're trained to get information quickly from people that are having the worst day of their life. And it's critical that they do that. But right now, the fire we talked about, the volunteer departments can't talk to the fire department, who can't talk to the police department, who can't talk to the ambulance. That is a safety issue, a major safety issue. And it's one that needs to be addressed. And there's money out there. There's interoperability money through the federal government. So it's something to look for. This is really working well. Okay.
The space bar work?
Again, I apologize. I'm not exactly sure what's going on here or why this is happening. Thanks for bearing with me. Why don't you have 6 police departments? Why don't you have, you did it one time?
No, I read that line, I thought that was
Yeah. Why don't you have 6 HR departments? Why don't you have 6 public works departments? I understand from the culture of how this came to be, but I'm talking about integration now. This is not talking about getting rid of the volunteers. Quite frankly, you can't, and you shouldn't. You've got some very talented service there. This is not about getting rid of the career. It's talking about going together. My doctoral dissertation is in consolidations. I studied and I do consolidations. I'm not calling this a consolidation. I'm calling it an integration. What's the difference? They have to start working together. This study is not about separating these groups. It's about getting them to work together. It's not whether the career are better than the volunteers are better than the career. Each department should feel it with us. And it's not about who's wronged in all 6. What it's about is the people. Oh, the mic, thank you. It's about the people. With due respect, and I'll just be honest, because I'm old and I can get away with it, I never heard as much talk about Republicans and Democrats as I did in this city. And yet when I talked to each one of you, you talked about what's best for the people. But by talking about the Democrats like this and the Republicans like that, the message you sent out to everyone is, it's all political. Doesn't matter what you're doing. All your decisions are political. And it's a very big disservice to you. Because I spoke to each and every one of you. And that's not how you feel. So you really need to move beyond that. It's not about you. It's not about your department. It's about what's best for that person that needs the help. Do we really need to duplicate everything in all these 5 departments? Or can we start getting specialties? Can one department be the expert on extrication? Can one be on tank and tenders? Can one be on aerial? And can we share those resources at fires instead of duplicating with 49 or 52 depends because you were selling equipment on that. What it is about a unified fire and EMS system with very, very diverse parts. Very diverse parts. It's about putting it together for that. Now I sound like a broken record, but how do we do that? Well, we do that with a recommendation that is 180 degrees from what I've done in my career. The last thing I want to do is add somebody in the hierarchy up here. Usually I try to take it away. I try to minimize that. But right now, you have a city manager that has a bunch of people reporting to him, and is supposed to have 6 different fire chiefs, all of which have a lot of autonomy. A lot of them, when asked, what authority does the city have on your department? The answer I heard most was none. I'm sorry, the golden rule, he who has the gold usually makes the rules. So what we're suggesting is an individual that is going to oversee putting all these diverse pieces together. I need a new fire truck. I don't need it because the other department just got one. I want to know the pumping capacity. I want to know what your district is, how much water you need to move, how you're going to move it. Can you move it with other people? Can dispatch actually not have to go to a separate computer and go through 700 cards that are PDF to determine who should go where? Because quite frankly, they can't do it. They don't have time. Because there's 6 different ways we write cards. There's 6 different ways we write SOGs, if we write them. There's 6 different ways we hire people. And we need someone to begin to unify that. And you can't have, and I'm not picking on your manager, but you can't have 6 more people span of control reporting to him. You really need this individual to do that. Well, why can't it be one of the chiefs? Because this can't be done by a peer. I'm looking at all the chiefs as having authority, their department, but you can't have a peer telling the others what to do. It isn't going to work. You can't. I got asked earlier, we talked to the press, and they said, well, why can't it be this chief? And I said, is there a hierarchy in your press? I said, yeah. I said, where do you fall? You top, second? He said, about 3rd or 4th. I said, okay, so you're going to walk in and tell everyone what to do. It's not going to work. Okay? Not because they're bad people, but it's a culture. And the culture needs to be worked on slowly. And here's what the commissioner is going to do. You do not see the word consolidation up there. What you see is fusion, combination, aligning. Let's take the excellence in every one of these departments we found, and yes, you have some real diamonds when it comes to fire chiefs. And it's not just in one department. You've got a number out there, and you say have some real diamonds. Let's take that expertise, and let's start focusing it together. Do we need 6 different applications? Well, you know what? Bottom line is, when things go to hell in a handbasket, it's on your desk. You're responsible for providing the service. Voluntary department can say, well, you know, we didn't mean for that to happen. I'll ask right now, is there anybody that can tell me of the 6 departments what the driving status is of everyone that drives the apparatus? I imagine the chiefs can in their own, but can they in all of them? These are things that you need to protect yourself on. These are things that that person will do. Are we adding a level? A critical level. An absolute critical level for this to work.
All right. Going to talk a little bit about, a little bit tonight about governance, which is important here. Some of this is going to be kind of a little bit of a repeat, but we have the Norwich Fire Department here. We have the 5 volunteer fire departments that are operating here. And then, as Dr. McGrath already said, we've got 6 different opinions on the same subject that are going to the city manager. It just doesn't work. Somebody needs to have that total overarching vision of what it is that's occurring in Occam, what's occurring in Laurel, what's in Norwich, what's in Taftsville. Put it all together and look from that 30,000-foot level, and then be able to communicate, organize, communicate amongst these departments, then go back and organize and prioritize and work with the city manager, the council, the public safety committee to do what we've talked about this evening. It's a very, very difficult issue. One of the things that just kind of jumped out to me here real quick was the fact that I'm looking and I'm wondering to myself, part of the study was, I'm going, well, okay, let's work things backwards. I always, as fire chief, I always said, you know, what would happen if everything went wrong and somebody had to answer for it? Okay? So if you had a really bad fire, and let's just say it was in the town consolidated district, if things went really bad, and the Norwich fire chief was there, and there was 4 of the other 5 fire chiefs there, and somebody had to be held accountable for that, what would it be? Because I looked at your ordinances, and the ordinances talks about the fire chief, kind of has a bunch of sentences about what that person's supposed to do. Then it also has another paragraph about the volunteer chiefs. And it talks about following the orders of the fire chief. Which one? So, from a consequent management standpoint, I think the council, the city manager, and I think the citizens deserve to have a fire chief. Somebody who's held accountable in good times and unfortunately in bad times. And if the charter ordinance is so unclear, how do we expect the chiefs here, Chief Montoya, or anyone else to know who's responsible? That's the reason why we talk about having a commissioner to organize and to take the talents and to blend this all together, much like a symphony conductor who can get the brass, the woodwinds, all working together to make beautiful music. That's what we're talking about right here. We think the commissioner is the appropriate issue, is the appropriate manner in which to get that done. Justin?
Thank you. So Dr. McGrath and Chief Cleveland kind of gave you the first couple major points of emphasis from the study. Now we're going to take a quick step back and start delving into some of the meat and potatoes of kind of what we researched, found, came up with, all of that type of stuff. So just a couple little things about what we discovered on the overview of everything. So first off, it was very evident right off the bat what a rich history everybody in this room and everybody in this city and beyond lives, both with the central city district and every volunteer agency out there. It's very obvious the pride that everybody has for their department and their history, the pride for the membership, the pride for the vehicles, just the pride for the overall operations. And we saw that. And it is, you all have something to be proud of, absolutely. But one of the things that also was very noticeable, number one, almost every fire vehicle, no matter if it's a volunteer agency or here in the city, says City of Norwich on the side, right? So you're all under the City of Norwich. We're together, right? We're serving the citizens of Norwich. But there's still some separation there. A lot of separation there. And that's kind of what has to methodically start to update and change a little bit. And that's kind of what goes into what Chief Cleveland was just detailing, and Chief McGrath has talked about. That fire commissioner should be in place to integrate some of that togetherness, but separateness that we absolutely see. There'll be some other sections to talk about that separate functions that we see. Training, sometimes it happens together, a lot of times it doesn't, right? Responses, sometimes you're responding together, many times you're not. We've heard the stories. We've heard the constructive complaints, and the togetherness needs to improve, and that's what we see, and that's what we see the commissioner being able to help with. Another thing that we heard quite often is, hey, what's this going to do for the volunteers? Is this study going to go after the volunteers? Absolutely not. Quite the opposite. We put this talking point in here for a couple of reasons, but number one, the value that the city gets from the volunteer departments is outstanding and noticeable. And quite honestly, it's quite opposite of what we see nationwide. You heard Dr. McGrath talk about the states that we've done studies in, nationwide. And for the most part, nationwide, volunteerism is down, and not just in the fire service, across the board in any industry, but certainly the fire service, volunteerism is down. One case study is the state of Pennsylvania. Not that long ago, within 2 decades, the state of Pennsylvania enjoyed having volunteer firefighter corps of about 300,000. 2 years ago, the study showed Pennsylvania volunteers were at 30,000. But we see the opposite of that in Norwich. Every chief I talked to said, you have a steady, proud group, all active, and that's not what we see nationwide. So we want you to harness that, and we expect you to harness that. And it goes back to that middle bullet point. You guys aren't separate. You guys are all together, and we should operate that way.
The national standards I'm going to talk about this very quickly. Those that are in red are non-mandatory. Those in green are mandatory. NFPA is a double-edged sword. You do not want to adopt it, but you want to be aware of it, because if you adopt it, you adopt all the codes in reference to it. And we actually had a client that did that went bankrupt. But you want to strive to meeting as many of them as you can. Now, there's different standards. For the volunteers, they work under NFPA 1720, which means that, again, it's a standard, it's not mandatory. But if one of the firefighters were to kill, you'd have more 3- and 4-letter agencies in here asking you, Consul, why didn't you do something? And what you want to say is, we're aware of it, and we're working towards reaching those goals as soon as we can. 1720, how soon they have to be there? It depends on how many people live within a square mile. It depends on the drive time, minimum staffing, and they have to meet their objectives somewhere between 80 and 90%. Career department is NFPA 1710, much more rigid. From the time the person picks up the phone and says, I need X, they have 60 seconds for dispatch to put it through and tone. The folks that are on duty have 60 seconds if it's an EMS call, and 80 seconds if it's a fire call to get out the door. And it should be a 4-minute drive time within 90% of the time. These are the requirements, and you meet those. The problem is that I collected the data and worked on it, and the state gives you emergency responding, which is a fantastic program. Some of them don't use it at all. Some of them use a little bit, and some of them use it very well. But when you talk about response time, I actually had, I don't put this in a report unless 3 people says this to my face. Response time doesn't matter. Excuse me? But it'd matter if it was your loved one. It wouldn't matter if it was you. It's not bad people. This is just a person, and they're really in the minority, that has been in this culture, that we're protecting that culture. And the vast majority of them want what's best, believe me. They absolutely do. You have EMTs, you have advanced EMTs, you have medical responders, you have paramedics. If some of those folks arrive within 4 minutes with an AED, an automatic external defibrillator, in fact, I think I saw one in the building. Now, advanced life support has up to 8 minutes to get there, not 4. Okay? Now, you have some departments that don't want to go on any EMS, and you have one department that decided they'll go on all of them. And it's pretty expensive to run a ladder truck or an engine on a minor injury, when you could do that with an SUV and 2 firefighters. Okay, no, we have to have that equipment, because if we get there and we have a fire and we need that ladder truck, we got to go right away. Well, what are you going to do, abandon the patient? But 70+% of what these departments are doing are EMS. You have to align your resources with what you're doing. That makes common sense. Now, there's a whole bunch of fire chiefs that just rolled over in their grave when I said that, believe me. But that's what needs to happen when it goes. OSHA. Well, we're not an OSHA state. Yeah, you are when it comes to this. You got 2 in, 2 out. Every one of these departments honors that and works towards it. They have work teams. They work together. Bless them. Okay? Applaud all 6 of them. Do it. You have ISO. All right. I have a degree. I'm supposed to know how to research. So my goal, now this just shows you that, you know, I have big goals in life, was to find out exactly what would happen if you went from a 3 to a 4. Now, we know there'd be dead babies in the streets, and we know there'd be a party to the Red Sea with all the citizens that are going to leave and everything else. But you can't find out. And the reason you can't find out, yes, we went to the corporate offices in Chicago, and we talked to the head people, and I finally found a fire chief who owned an insurance company. And he said it's up to how bad we want to insure them. It's a reference. You're a 3. The city is a 3, and that's when they evaluate career and all the volunteers. That is a very impressive ISO grading. But don't let someone sell you down the tube that ISO is going to change and people are going to leave. And I have asked, I've been doing this a long time, show me the refund check when your department went from a 5 to a 4. And no one's been able to do that yet. So you can't ignore it, but it's an antiquated way of measuring it. Here, if you want to measure something better, don't ask me how I keep doing that. Use accreditation. 250 performance indicators, 70 core performances. Measure yourself against that. I'm not telling you should accredit it, even though I think in the future your career department might want to consider it. I don't think they're there yet, but I think they might want to consider it. But this is where you have to justify why you do everything you do. We put a hole in the roof, we cover it with plywood. Why? We're protecting their property. Question is, should you be, or should a private company be doing that? They could do it cheaper and get you back in service. I'm sorry, we've always done it. Those are the type of questions they're going to ask. Who has that? You?
All right, we'll talk a little bit about the things you do, the things we do from an emergency standpoint around the city. I've talked about it already, so we won't beat it to death, but the data shows about 70% of the calls ran not only in Norwich, but this is pretty consistent all around. EMS does drive our profession these days. And is our decision-making based on that? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But numbers show about 70% of what we do, especially here in Norwich, is EMS. He also talked about data, but I'll just drive this home a little bit more. Data counts. Studying data counts and is important. And we just want to drive home the importance of every department, volunteer and career, to really use caution, use emergency reporting. Data counts. Data is going to count for council's decisions. Data should count for emergency response decisions. Data counts, and the departments need to be unified in using data to your benefit and keeping track of calls. Legal purposes as well. Now, a couple minutes ago, I talked for a couple minutes about how valuable the volunteer departments were, and every minute of that, every second of that was true. I also want to talk about Chief Montoya's department here in the CCD. You should be proud of your group as well. So in conjunction, these groups cover the city of Norwich very well. So kudos to the career department as well. So we're going to just talk about a couple of things that we noticed as a group as we study the departments, and we have a few recommendations as to how we feel the career department could operate a little more efficiently as well. Again, data-driven, using the data, using the operational data, personnel data, response data, all goes into our computing bank and goes into how we come to some of our decisions. Let me go back for a second. So one of our recommendations in the report is to transfer one of the engine companies here in the CCD to an EMS response vehicle, and that's for a couple reasons. At Headquarters Station, you might be aware there's 2 fully staffed fire engines. Again, you go back to the data, 70% EMS. That's what we're doing these days. So we feel NFD could do a better service to those calling for help in conjunction with American Ambulance to switch staffing from that second engine at Station 1 at Headquarters Station into a smaller, more efficient EMS response vehicle. And you can certainly read about that in the report. I won't harp on that too much, but we feel, again, that's going to help the department run more efficiently and serve the public a little bit better. One of the key details and key unique aspects of the slide and the things that we're talking about and we're about to talk about is they're going to require some negotiation. And Mr. Salamone and we have had many discussions about this. This is one of the few areas of the report that we can't just give you a recommendation and you can say, yes, let's do it. The reality is some of the aspects of what we're recommending will require some negotiation on your part. But again, they're in the report because we feel it will do the organization better and it will do your city a little bit better. So case in point is we recommend a shift or a platoon change to a 24-48. We understand the department's work. What's in writing is a 10-14 with 72 off, with the most personnel working those back to back, essentially creating a 24-72. We feel the department could just be run a little more efficiently with higher levels of staffing on each platoon in a 24-48 schedule. Again, that will depend on some negotiation, and there are details within that schedule, platoon schedule, that would have to be negotiated. We obviously can't do that for you. Back real quick to engine staffing. One of the things that we had noticed through our research was that Greenville Engine 2 used to be a 4-person company, and we would recommend going back to a 4-person company. When you changed over Engine 3 from Headquarters Station to a 2-person EMS response vehicle, we feel that 3rd person on Engine 3 could shift to the Greenville company and make a 4-person crew. We understand that the majority of fires are in the Greenville area, that, again, like I said, that crew used to be 4. We see the benefit of returning that to a 4-person crew. But again, that will depend on negotiation between the city and the local, depending on staffing levels, platoon levels. We do feel that by going to a potential 16 firefighter platoon, three platoons of 16 firefighters would allow for that. In addition, with with altering Engine 3's personnel. Again, you can read a little bit more about that detail in the report. Utilization of all city resources kind of comes down to this. What we talked about before. All city resources. Volunteer companies, CCD companies, NFD companies. We feel there is a definite opportunity to work together a little bit better in automatic responses to structure fires. And again, terminology can be worked out, but essentially it kind of comes down to an easy description of this. We do feel that the town areas would benefit from an engine from the CCD coming on a report of a structure fire, but vice versa, we feel the CCD would benefit from the closest volunteer engine coming in on reports of a structure fire. And this can be done automatically. This can be done automatically with a CAD system that tells the dispatch who's closest, who's due, with a couple clicks of that mouse. Again, this all goes back to the fact that we feel this is what is best for those calling for help. Everybody's favorite.
I'm probably the only one in the room that salivates over human resources. And for me, it's the best topic of the report. I will also make it the shortest because I also understand I'm the only one that really gets into HR. So anyways, we need the down button. All right, let's talk about employment. One of the things that we have to really understand is that you are governed under a lot of federal and state employment laws. There's a number of them listed in the report, but just to name a few, there's the Civil Rights Act, which requires at least 15 or more employees. There's FLSA, which has 1 or more employees. There's the Immigration and Control Act, which doesn't mean you have to have any employees, but you still have to prove people are eligible to work in the United States. In addition to that, the state of Connecticut enhances some of those and has some of their own employment laws. And so the Civil Rights Act has some extra areas in which are covered here in the state that are not covered on the federal level. So why do we care about this? Why is this important? Well, the big question becomes, who's the employer? All right? And that was a question that I asked everyone. Who is the employer? Is it the city? Is it the volunteer companies? And the answer is this. I'm sorry, it's the city. You are all city employees, and therefore the actions of the volunteer departments are going to be under the umbrella of the city, and so even though the volunteer fire department may not have 15 employees, the city has 15 employees. And so therefore all of the federal and state discrimination laws apply to everyone, whether it's a city or whether it's the volunteer fire departments. And so there's a number of areas in which the city and the volunteer fire departments really have to work on. Because let's just say there's a number of areas of duplication. We've said this before. There's 6 employment applications. 6 different ones. Now, several of the volunteer fire departments use the city's application, but then they also have a supplementary application in which they add with it. Let's just say there's a number of questions on some of those applications that really shouldn't be on an application in the year 2021. And those could come back to haunt both the volunteer and the city departments because they're definitely could be challenged as whether or not they're legal or not. You have 6 different promotional processes. You have 6 different recruitment processes. In some cases, you have an employee handbook. In some cases, you don't have any personnel policies. It happens to be what's written in the bylaws. And you've got a wonderful resource here within the city, because let's put it bluntly, these are volunteer chiefs. And when you volunteer to be a chief in a fire department, one of the things that is not the most exciting piece to deal with is human resources. It's much more fun to deal with the equipment and the emergencies and all that stuff rather than having to deal with what should the recruitment be, what should we do, how should we do it, how should we do promotions. There are no job descriptions. And so if we started working together and use the city's HR department, maybe we only need one employment application. Now, there might need to be a separate section for volunteers versus full-time, but there's no reason why we need to have 6 different ones. We're taking time administratively away from volunteer departments that really should be focused more on getting together what's the emergency and how we're going to handle it. You had some issues in the past with some of the training or lack of training that's not done in some of these departments. And there are things like sexual harassment suits. Right now, I think it was in 2019, the International Association of Fire Chiefs had their whole seminar built around bullying in the fire service. So these are issues that really need to be taken care of from a human resources perspective. And let's stop duplicating efforts and let's work together. This is just an example, but in Appendix G of the report, what I did was I looked at the age and years of service of every department. And this is very critical information. And it's critical from a couple of points. First of all, for volunteer agencies, what they normally say is people within their 20s to early 30s are the folks that are the easiest to lose. Because I come into the service when I'm 18, 19 years old, I get to be 25, 26, and then something kind of gets in the way. Life. I get married, I have kids, I have a job, and so volunteerism has a tendency to fall off during that time period. It's also a time period where, especially if you look at the types of folks that are coming into the fire service, they really need to feel valued. And they really need to feel that they're a part of the organization. And that's more than just getting voted on to the next level. The other issue you have in all of your departments is you have a number of folks at the top of the age and years of service range, which means they have done their service, but they have a lot of knowledge that's going to walk out that door. And what are you going to do to close the gap between this group and this group? And again, it's not just voting on people. You need to have job descriptions. You need to have qualifications, even in a volunteer department. Why do all of your job descriptions have to be different? Why can't I have a job description of a captain, and the captain does the same type of work, regardless if I'm here, or if I'm there, or if I'm over there? And all of a sudden, one department loses their captain for whatever reason. Somebody else could then just jump in from another department if we all were working together. So, the other things that are covered in the report, which I am not going to bore you with, but there's a lot of things that talk about recruitment, job descriptions, handbooks, SOGs, and we did do a whole section on contract recommendations. Very seldom do you sit down when you do contract negotiations and read the entire contract, so there are recommendations in there. However, we totally understand that any of those recommendations have to be negotiated.
All right, me again. And so Dr. McGrath broached on this a little bit earlier, so I'm not going to harp on it. But a very important part of what we did was analyze the apparatus all across the city, all departments. And going back to point number 1, we do understand the individuality of each department and the pride you have for the vehicles that you have. But unfortunately, that doesn't justify, again, duplication across the city of Norwich with one fleet maintenance division. Mr. Raymond and his crew do a great job keeping everything in tip-top shape, not only in the fire area, but in police and public works and everywhere. Tremendous workload on that. Again, for serving the same city, right? So just out of comparison, Dr. McGrath touched on this a little bit before. Here's a few examples from around the country of similar-sized agencies from a few different states. So we're not just cherry-picking 1 or 2 states here. Essentially, all 6 station departments in all different areas of the country. And it's not even close how much apparatus is maintained by these cities. Again, we are very careful not to say, but over here they do it, and over here they should do it. But when it comes to vehicles covering a certain specified area, Norwich has a tremendous amount of vehicles to maintain and again to duplicate services. So within the report, there are some recommendations on some pieces of equipment to get rid of, potentially right away, a few to retire within a few years and not replace. And to go along with this, the position of a commissioner also potentially would have heavy input on what should stay, what could be duplicated, what doesn't need to be duplicated, that type of thing. Again, we're fully understanding at the pride everybody has for their fleet. But again, we're together, right? We're together, we're not separate. We're City of Norwich. So we feel very aligned. We talked about Engine 3 at headquarters of NFD, also the benefit of transferring that to an EMS response vehicle. I won't repeat myself on that. Real quick on facilities, one of our other focuses here was just to check your stations. And for the most part, similar to apparatus, we know that you guys really take pride in your stations. A couple of them historic buildings, not only in the city of Norwich, but in the whole state of Connecticut. Very impressive. And even the buildings that aren't so old, we can tell you take care of. You take great pride in them. And so just a couple minor recommendations that we did see that I'll point out to the board, just in case you don't start nodding off by the time you get to that section of reading. At East Great Plain, we noticed there's some asbestos issues upstairs. Now, again, that area is not being used right now for COVID, but I know in non-COVID times, that is a fairly busy community room up there, so it's just an issue that you might want to include in the budget at some point here pretty soon, safety issue to take care of that asbestos upstairs. Likewise, if and when we get to finally use our buildings again for the public, whenever that may be, hopefully sooner than later, EGP also has an access issue upstairs, so we hope that potentially you could look at a chairlift for that to kind of get up to ADA standards with that. The only other thing I'll take some time, and again, this is absolutely not to pick on any one department at all, but for the board's reference, the Antioch Fire Station has to have some type of diesel exhaust system. This isn't just in Connecticut, this is nationwide. Diesel fumes and diesel exhaust and carcinogens from exhaust and fires cause cancer in firefighters. And another thing for the budget, sooner than later, high priority item, we really hope that you consider a diesel exhaust system for the Antioch Station. And for other details of the study we did on facilities, I invite you to read that further in the report.
Okay, going to talk a little bit about training. And essentially, training separate and distinct. There's really no crossover training between the two. And again, when there's an emergency, it's got to be all hands. Everybody's got to be working together, whether you're paid or volunteer. With that commissioner concept, that's what ends up having to happen. You have one training curriculum that's used amongst all the departments, whether it's Occam, whether it's the Norwich City, drafting versus working off hydrants. You have to have that same operational procedures. Why should they be different? They shouldn't be different. They all have to be operating the same way. Joint training. If Norwich City is not training with Taftsville or anybody else, or Occam is not training with Laurel, there's a problem. Because when disaster hits, whether it's flooding, whether it's a massive fire, massive casualty situation, everybody needs to be working together, and you have to have that joint training. That's critical. Standardized equipment. When you go to a structure fire, if you have Department A has this type of SCBA, Department B bought a different set, how are the two going to work together? You don't even know how to use them. You're not having integration. You're not having that interoperability between agencies. All your equipment needs to be standardized. And again, the supervision, There are differences in terms of motivating career people, motivating volunteers, but you know something? It's all about human resource management, managing the most important resource you have, and that's your people. Succession planning. I think Dr. McGrath talked a little bit about that. How are you going to replace these key positions? You gotta have training, especially in the supervisory area, to get this stuff done. Fiscal, very quickly, we're not advocating any change in the tax rates, no change between funding mechanisms between the CCD and TCD. When I look back and did a look at all the previous studies, that seemed to be what they're focusing on. And we're not even there yet. Let's focus on working together. With the commissioner, you're going to have an integrated budget. All right? Not only just monitoring your expenditures, but the creation of the capital improvement plan, your maintenance, standardizing maintenance, getting equipment inventory. You probably, I would venture to say, you probably don't even know what equipment that you have. And if one piece breaks over here, I'm sure there's another piece that could be used temporarily. And again, we probably don't need 6 of the same tools. Equipment inventory is critical. Economies of scale. We talked about self-contained breathing apparatus. Each and every one of those units has to be flow tested each and every year. Well, when you're hiring probably 6 different vendors to come in because there's 6 different makes and models, you're not getting economies of scale. When you bid this equipment out, you'll probably get a lot better cost buying in larger quantities, and your training costs will be lower, and your maintenance costs will be lower. So again, that's the value of having this commissioner put in place. What we're talking about is a master plan for fire protection. Where are you now? Where are you going in the future? And more importantly, how is the roadmap going to be mapped out to get there? Both in terms of economics, someone's got to pay for it, and 2, operational, with the goal of let's do what's best for that person who's calling 911. That's really what we're talking about.
Thank you very much. Before from speaking with the manager, what we're going to do is take questions for the team. Is if whatever area it is, it's your area of expertise, if you go up to the center desk. I've just got to add one thing that Victoria left out, and I'm surprised she left it out because there was so much work on this, and that was believe they were city employees. And what you're doing right now is when it's convenient, they're city employees. When it's not convenient, well, they're a volunteer company. You can't be half pregnant. Either they are or they're not. And when things go really bad, someone's going to answer that for you. And we truly believe, without a question, they're city employees. They use the same. The numbers, just ID numbers, etc. Okay, thanks for putting up with us. I assume that you might have a question or 2.
For starters, John, do you have any comments to add as the city manager?
There is one important one, and I don't think Tim has mentioned it tonight, but I made it clear when they were retained by the city that we had the broad parameters that the council approved, the 6 items in the resolution, but I would not, other than to provide them information, would not try to write the report or influence it in any way. If there's something in there that I didn't particularly care for, I wasn't going to say, well, you shouldn't put that in there, and items like that. So the report and the ideas are strictly the consultant I'm not trying to take no responsibility for it, but I wanted to emphasize that their study was unencumbered by any preconceived notions that management had.
Or the fire, thank you for pointing that out, or the fire chiefs. No one told us you have to say this or don't say that. First off, you know my personality, we know that we don't do that. But this is us standing on the balcony, looking down at a great organization, excited. That's why I brought them all here tonight. And the possibilities that you got a choice. This can be the 7th report that puts on a shelf, or it's an opportunity to begin to integrate and work on the things, and it's going to take time. But no, no one told us what's right and not right. We don't look that way. Question?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to call on every council member. The concept I think would help move things through is each member maybe take their top 2 questions, and we'll keep moving through the council, and we'll keep going round robin to everyone who still has questions left after that first set. And I just want everyone to have an opportunity to be part of this discussion tonight. I think it's really important that we hear from everyone who's sitting up here. I really think that's important. So I'm just going to, Alderman Gould.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight.
And I'll keep track.
I'm going to make one quick statement, that there's absolutely no question that the dispatch system that we currently utilize here in the city of Norwich is in critical need of a complete technological overhaul. But you haven't pointed out to us this is a new problem. We've been talking about this for, I don't even want to say how many years. That should be our #1 priority, as we endanger the lives of our firefighters with that system. But I also want to say that we have very competent men and women who work at the Norwich Police Department and the dispatch center who do an extraordinary job with the antiquated system we have. You've made a recommendation that a fire commissioner would solve, and I'm using your words, the considerable tension and the little cooperation that exists between the paid and the volunteer departments. Can you give me an example regionally? Because as you pointed out, firefighting in the Northeast is different than firefighting in the Midwest, than it is in Florida, isn't it? Can you give me any examples where the position of a fire commissioner would alleviate any of these real or the perceived notions that we have considerable tension and little cooperation between the career department and the volunteer department?
Working right now in Pennsylvania, Chester, the city of Chester, as commissioner. The point with the commissioner, I don't know, because I think we've made the point, is it can't be done by a peer. If there's differences already because of their culture, not because they're bad people, they're not, but it has to be someone that's perceived as neutral. And quite frankly, I don't think a manager can take on 6 more people in the span of control. So will it work? I think that people have to be held accountable. And when they ask for something, we need to separate needs from wants. And they've done a pretty good job of doing that. But somebody has to be the person that oversees it and comes to your manager and says, here's your vision, and here's the way we need to go. And you're going to have to make the tough decisions to do that. So, yeah, we've seen it work. We just did one in Atlanta, Georgia. Was it Atlanta?
I'm thinking about Texas.
Yeah, Texas, same thing. So yes, we've seen it.
Okay, and my second, in one sentence on page 32, you say that the fire commissioner would perform administrative functions of leadership, management, and supervision, but not operational issues. But in the very next paragraph, you say that the functions of the fire commissioner would involve planning, organizing, directing, coordinating, controlling the operations of the departments and the personnel. So this King Solomon, who's going to be working 24 hours a day, so if we hire this fire commissioner who's doing all of these things, then why do I need Chief Blanchard, Chief Westervelt, Chief Montoya? If he's going to be controlling the leadership, the management, the supervision, the planning, the organizing, the directing, the coordinating, and controlling the operations of every department and their personnel, I don't need chiefs.
Thank you, and I appreciate the fact that A, you read it, and B, you articulated it very clearly. I respectfully disagree with you. And that is, you need the individual chiefs to run it. This person's not going to work 24 hours a day. This person is probably going to work weekdays, meet with the evenings, just simple things. One of my questions to the volunteer fire department is, when do you meet? Here was my answer: once a week, every other week, once a month. Well, we don't do it very often, or 5, I don't know. I'm sorry. You can't have that type of autonomy and get to where you want. If you want you have a great foundation, but they gotta work together better. Because I'm focusing on the person that needs the help. That's why. That's how I would answer your question. This commissioner is gonna be the filter of all their wants and help make the hard decision through you, through the Public Safety Committee, through the council of making that decision. Did I answer your question?
Partially. Thank you.
What part didn't I answer? Because I think it's an important question.
Well, because you said that this commissioner is going to bring the two groups together. Because there is, your words I'm using, considerable tension and little cooperation.
Respectfully, do you feel there's any tension between the career and the volunteers?
I think that there have been incidents in the past.
But not now.
I can't say that I know of anything that happened in recent time.
This individual is going to be an individual in my own words, if it sounds like I'm contradicting myself. Maybe I am, because I'm looking at it from 5 perspectives. It's not going to be operational. It's not going to be the person that says, no, let's put a second engine over here. Let's raise a ladder. Let's do offensive mode. Let's do a forward lay, not a reverse lay. Let's do a ventilation on the roof. Let's call in an air supply. No, that's not their job. Their job is to take the 6 applications and take the things out that shouldn't be in there and say, how do you vote on somebody? What are you voting on? What criteria? If I walk in, and now that you know me, you would, I think, but and you don't want me. What criteria? I'm a protected class. You better have some pretty strong requirements and things in place, because those are the things that are going to come back and hit you. Not because of them doing something bad, because it isn't organized as a unified effort. So you need the chiefs. You need all 6 of them. And you're going to need them for a while. Will you ever consolidate? Probably. But I don't think it'll be for a while. Did that help or not?
Better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Tim, and to your group. for being here tonight. I'd like to follow up on questions we heard about the fire commissioner. They were at the top of my list. First, is my understanding that the fire commissioner's role, because I noticed the same exact turn of a phrase on page 31 and 32 with regard to operational issues or operational events versus directs the operations. I understood, and so my first question is, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding of the fire commissioner would be an administrative function overseeing the operations, not the tactical operations, but the administrative operations of all 6 departments, reporting directly, and that person would be reporting directly to the city manager.
That's the purpose. Let me answer it this way. For the 6 departments, she says in here, and it's not 6 departments, unfortunately. It's going to freeze tonight, right? You want to go down to freezing? Some of you raised the ladder with the fly out. Some of you raised it with the fly in. What's the difference? Well, if I train and I'm carrying a saw on the roof or something else and it flies out, it's a different spacing on the rungs, is it not? Why aren't we throwing the ladders the same way? That's something the commissioner can say in the training curriculum. Because it could be a safety factor. It could be as simple as that. Why am I using SCBA and you're using MSA, okay? So if my air runs out, I can't grab your tank. I gotta run way down there to the engine to get one. Wouldn't it be better if I could just reach over and take that tank that's right there and get back in a critical life saving? So operationally, these are things this person's gonna see. Is he gonna go to a fire and say, no, stop, no, don't ventilate the roof? No, that's their areas of expertise. So I'm sorry it's confusing. And I'm sorry we didn't articulate it better. And all I can do is attempt to explain what we're trying to say, and if I can't, then I cannot. And everybody should be sitting down.
Alderman DeLucia, you still have the floor.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to step off of the fire commissioner for a moment and ask specifically in the report with regard to apparatus. I picked up, there were a couple of things that didn't seem to quite to mesh. So I was looking at pages 118 through 120, where your report makes recommendations about what apparatus are highlighted in yellow, which were apparatus that, excuse me if I just go through there. Yeah. So we had apparatus that were highlighted in yellow and apparatus that were highlighted in red. And it seemed to me that the individual department schedules, right, or tables, okay, didn't jive with the overall master schedule of all the apparatus. So just to kind of clarify what I saw in the report to what I see as the inconsistency. So, and I'm looking right now at page 119 onto 120, starting with the first table. Okay, so E52, which is engine 52 out in East Great Plain, highlighted as highlighted in yellow. Okay, Squad A highlighted, also highlighted in yellow in the Norwich, on the Norwich table, but not on this engine totals report. Tafel ET22, Yannick's engine 32, these were all highlighted in yellow in the individual department reports, and also when I look at the individual pages that had actual pictures, right? So I guess my question is that, so that was the inconsistency that threw me off. My question is that the engines that are highlighted in red are literally take them out of service as soon as possible. And the ones that are highlighted in yellow are the ones that you're saying, when they reach the end of their lifespan, do not replace them. Is
That is correct.
That was
Yes.
the format that, okay.
Yes.
So, that being the case,
Not to interrupt you, but I guess a blanket apology if there were a couple transcription that didn't exactly match. Should have been pretty darn close, but again, we're dealing with so many vehicles at varying ages. And another good point that is a bit worth repeating, maybe I didn't mention it, but that we put in the report, is that there are NFPA guidelines related to vehicles and when they should go to reserve and being taken out of service. But again, there's no one size fits all, again, nationwide. It depends on maintenance records, age of vehicle, how well it's taken care of. Need, again, we can't necessarily tell you exact need. We can just go by what we're seeing based on the age, based on the hours, based on the calls, call types, and the overall age, again, and the duplication of services. So that all of that kind of goes in the filter of also keeping in mind, again, we know how proud everybody is of their vehicles, but the duplication of services just doesn't warrant keeping 49 vehicles across of 6 departments in one city. So yes, your assumptions are correct in general, unless there is an error here or there, which I don't think there were many, but the red means that we would recommend taking it out of service right away, and the gold means, okay, don't pull it right away, it still has some value, but in the 2 years or 3 years when it hits its 25 or 30-year mark, pull it from service.
Right, and the only reason why I just feels like I might be tiptoeing around this because I have a number of specific questions, but I'm respecting our format here. So I'll ask that. My second question will be a more general question overall. Okay. Sure. These changes in the apparatus assignments and the physical pieces in the firehouses has to coincide with the changes in our dispatching protocols. In other words, our run cards.
Sure.
All right. So this is really two big things where the apparatus is one part of the issue. Dispatch order and dispatching assignments and quote unquote run cards they're going to have to mesh and they're going to have to be addressed at the same time. Is that a fair?
Absolutely, I would agree. It should come up automatically in that CAD screen. And I'm just making up numbers. Engine 1 from Norwich and engine 52. Yes, there's some alterations here to vehicles being available or potentially renumbered from engine 3 to EMS 1 or whatever you call it. Absolutely, that would all go into just working together and a little more efficiently as that dispatcher takes the call and gets it toned. So yeah, in full agreement, it would all have to be intertwined together, absolutely.
Okay. That's my two, thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Nash?
I want to thank the group for the recommendations and the study that they did. I'm not going to lie about it. I didn't vote for it. I thought it was a little bit, with this atmosphere, a little bit waste of money at the time. After reading the study, and I won't deny that it took me several times to get past page 90 because I was dozing off to it, and a lot of the technical jargon and stuff, I appreciate it all, and it does give me a sight. I personally don't have any questions for the group. My question is to the council. Regardless of how we're going to implement, not implement, shove it on a shelf, whatever we're going to do with it. And to kind of piggyback off of Alderman DeLucia's, we as a council, whether it's this council or the next council, needs to sit down and put together a committee that's going to need to dig into this, because it is a multi-phase operation. It's not going to be done overnight or in 6 months. It could take anywhere, just to implement this entire plan, could take us a year or two to put all these pieces together into the puzzle that this group put together for us, and I want to thank them for that. And so I'm going to hold off my questions until we can sit down, whether in an executive session with the public safety, however we're going to do this, because I have a ton of questions, but it's none to these people. And I want to thank you all for the hard work you did, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment.
Thank you. Alderwoman Miles?
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. The biggest takeaway that I get from this, especially with the thought of implementing a commissioner position, is that it's about standardization. So standardization allows for efficiency. And I understand that. Just as a city in general, we all need to look at efficiencies. And if everyone is doing it the same way, then it makes it a little bit easier. And then it does come down to safety for our firefighters, safety and what that person in need is looking for. So I understand that. I don't have any issues with that. It's a lot of good information. It's a lot of information to digest. And to piggyback on Alderman Nash, yes, the plan would take a long time to implement. It's not going to happen overnight. Any change is difficult for any person. So looking to change ideas, cultures, organizational behaviors, it's a process. But the bottom line at the end of the day is efficiency, keeping our firefighters safe, and being a positive service for the community. So that's my only comments.
Thank you, and I enjoyed the conversation we had where you shared your thoughts very openly. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Bettencourt.
First, I'm going to say that I think, and you've repeatedly tried, you repeatedly did touch on this before, that, I think we all appreciate the service both the volunteer and the career departments render. They do a great job. Honestly, though, we've tried to work around some shortfalls, obviously, from what, some of this was eye-opening to me. But as far as questions go, I'm going to start with dispatch, because as I probably mentioned to you, that's what I do for a living. I manage a dispatch center. Although it's a private concern, we still dispatch a fire department, so I've got some idea how we work. I'm going to have some questions for Chief Daly specifically about radio operations, but so you don't need to answer that. But I don't want to waste my 2 questions for that right now. But you didn't mention the other position that you recommended in the study, which was the dispatch supervisor. So, so my question there is, obviously is an issue we'd have to pay for it, but I'm more concerned with what that, and you mentioned training specifically, but what other, would they just maintain a total supervisory role over the whole dispatch center? Would they be doing the whole, working with the run card situation? Or, what exactly are they going to do? I would imagine, and where would they fall? Would they be under the fire commissioner, or would they be under the police department the way dispatch is now?
That's up for you to decide as to where they fall in the organization. I can tell you from my experience, dispatch supervisor, what they're going to do is make sure that all the dispatchers on all the different shifts are working under the same plans and operational guidelines to put out calls and to process calls. They're going to make sure, one of the things that we found out is when you go to a building in the middle of the night, there's information kept called emergency contact information. And when we met with the different departments, they were collecting the information, but it always wasn't getting to dispatch. And then dispatch wasn't verifying that that information's correct. And then the departments weren't making sure it was correct on inspections. So that was kind of a loop process that needs to get done. So when you have that call in the middle of the night and you've got a broken sprinkler pipe and you want to get someone out there fairly quickly, you've got a good contact. Because we know if you have a shopping center like Kohl's or something, they're constantly changing over managers, and fire inspections will catch those contact people. So that's one thing they'll be doing. They'll be having a better understanding of your CAD system and be able to help the area fire chiefs, because they're good at putting fires out, but they may not know geographical or GIS information as to which is the better unit to respond and quicker, and they'll be able to help them work through those plans to get the right services to the people in the right amount of time.
Anything? Thank you. The one thing I will tell you that I was kind of surprised by was that I wasn't quite aware of, and I've already had some communication with Chief Daly about this, and because I hadn't spent any time in the dispatch center here in Norwich in quite some time, probably 6 years, since I've actually spent, yeah, something like that. So that since I actually spent some time there, since before you were deputy chief, probably, right? So so I will say that I'm just gonna ask the radio question out loud, and if anyone can answer, fine. Is there a simulcast capability on the system? And I'm getting a nod from Chief Daly. Yeah, so I'm just gonna say that, I mean, there's certainly ways of dealing with radio interoperability through dispatch. I mean, it's a workaround, admittedly, but, you know, by using simulcast and parroting transmissions, I mean, you can help have people be on the same page. Is that convenient? Is that really good? But that's only when you're talking back to the dispatch center, and isn't going to work, you know, admittedly for field communications between the firemen. So that's, you know, that's a problem. But the problem would still exist. But I'm just saying that that could alleviate, you know, some of the problem. You know,
that might help alleviate the initial dispatch. Some of the issues are going to be when these guys are operating on one frequency and not having multiple frequencies to move your other daily traffic to. So say you have that structure fire and you're going to dump them on the main system channel that you use every day. Well then, when you have a second set of calls, you've got that EMS call that needs a fire engine because it might be a cardiac arrest, or you have that car accident, you can farm that out to a separate channel on a 800 trunking system. So that's where your interoperability is, the ability to do that. So those guys that are functioning, guys and gals on the fire ground, aren't being affected by daily radio traffic that's going on that deliver services to the residents. And that's the important key of that radio system.
yeah, no, I mean, I recognize that there's an issue here regardless. I mean, that's just so I'm clear. I mean, and it's certainly something that, you know, we're going to have to look at, you know, spending some money on down the road. I guess I'll wait for the next round for more questions.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson, please.
Thank you, guys. I want to thank you guys for the hard work you guys did putting the report together. One of the things that stood out to me, and I think you've said it best, and it's kind of the philosophy I think not only just fire service should be thinking about, but I think each and every department within the city, anyone that does business with the city, which is what is best for the individual need of the person. I think, although it's in this report, I think that's what we should be thinking about no matter what. You know, I think one of the things that you touched on with the list of individuals that you spoke to for this report is that the fire service, although, you know, we're sitting here, many of the questions and discussion is around what's happening within the fire service. And the other part to that is there are so many other departments that they work with, that we do things with, that make this fire service what it is. So, you know, I think it's important that if I can take one thing from it, is that part. As we look as a city, that should be the philosophy of every department? What are we giving what's best for the individual needing a service? So I want to thank you for mentioning that and that kind of being a core focus. My first question, and it's really, I looked at the human resource part a lot. And I know in the report you talk about them being city employees or not being city employees. And so I think my bigger question is, when we give that tag or label as a city employee, what are the liabilities of doing that versus the way it's done now?
Well, first of all, I call them employees. It doesn't mean that they have to be paid.
Correct.
So I'm not looking at changing that, and I think the way that you compensate them is totally accurate. I think what the thing is you have to look at is some of the processes and some of the procedures that the individual fire companies are doing could have some legal ramifications to the city. So if, as Tim mentioned a few minutes ago, if I'm being voted upon to become a member and I'm not selected, you know, I could turn around and sue the organization for that. Now, I may not get compensation because you get front pay, back pay, all that kind of stuff, but I can sue for my right to be an employee or to be a volunteer here. So I'm concerned about that from that perspective. So, I don't want to get the city in trouble, but looking at some of the employment applications and some of the processes, I think you'd have a hard time justifying why. I use this in a class. I'm Juanita, a pregnant individual with a limp, and I come here to serve as a firefighter, and you turn me down. How are you going to prove that it wasn't because I'm a female, Hispanic, pregnant, handicapped person? You know, you don't do some of the testings that's involved. Now, again, I don't think you need to have as elaborate testing as you do on the career side, but at the same point in time, you still should have some physical types of qualifications. How are you going to prove that that's why you didn't do it?
And I will say, I appreciate that. You know, I think our volunteer departments as well as our paid department does an excellent job in trying to recruit and retain individuals. But I think that was, for me, that's a critical piece when we're talking. I know we mentioned talking about responsibility. Mm-hmm. You know, so if things like that happened, who takes responsibility for it? Right. You know, I appreciate that because, again, it's looking at who's going to take responsibility for it, but also overall the individuals that are trying to either be a part of the service or needing the service. So that was a big piece. And then the other part, while I'm on the human resource, I'll use my second question. You know, I know you talked about the employee handbook, and I'm all for, one centralized unison one. Now, within that, would you say that there would need to be sections or two different parts because of us having a paid and a volunteer department? How would you go about that?
Sure, I've developed a lot of employee handbooks, either for all volunteer departments or for city combination types of departments. And yes, you're going to have a definition section in there. You might have a section that talks about benefits or time off, and you're going to say, well, all full-time, part-time employees are eligible for this. Volunteer is obviously not going to be within that list. So there might be policies that are obviously going to be for everybody. Some of your hiring, when I say hiring, I mean the non-discriminational type policies, sexual harassment, computer usage, all those are going to be standard for everybody within the organization. You're going to have some policies that are going to be just for full-time. I don't know your benefit structure here because that wasn't part of the study. So whether you have full-time benefits, part-time benefits, volunteer benefits, because obviously you're going to have a section in the volunteer area where they're going to get their rebate or, all of a sudden I'm having a mental
abatement.
Thank you. Because that still should stay where it is. So that's going to be for volunteer folks only. So yes, you would have little carve-outs in there. You might need to have a section just for volunteers, but you can pretty much integrate that into one handbook.
Okay, and just kind of like a small subsection to that, that would be something that you would be recommending the fire commissioner and the human resource director work together.
Correct.
To create.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
If I could add, if this study is going to go to the Public Safety Committee, have a plaque made that says what's best for the individual needing help. as you're sitting at a table, and hopefully it will be a round table so you can look at each other. There's going to be a lot of emotions, there come up a lot of things, and at some point you got to take that black and white in the middle and bring everybody back to it. Secondly, you said, well, if we just leave it the way it is now, I'm not sure that it's quite as secure as you think it is now. And I hope you don't have a situation arises that you find out. So yes, I applaud you, but at least, you know, it's such a delicate road because you value these people. And yet you tell them now you're the city employee or whatever the case is. Their role's really not going to change. When we do consolidations, you know what? The line people, very little impact on it. But the upper management is the one that's more affected. So I applaud your thought. And I really, it's worth the $2.50 to have the plaque made. And when you have your meetings, put it right in the middle. Because that's what you got to come back to. That's what we did. Believe me, we got into some pretty deep discussion.
Alderwoman Gould.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I've got another statement that I'd sort of like to make. And this has to do with American Ambulance, because not everything that the 6 lines on page 17 are not 100% accurate. And I know Rob's here, and just got to clarify a few things, because I'm now looking at it at the headlines tomorrow, that American Ambulance doesn't do this or they don't do that. I'm thinking about it coming at it from a different angle. So yes, they provide the primary emergency medical services for the city of Norwich. And they determine the level of emergency response, basic, advanced, based on national, state, and local protocols. The responding fire departments are assisting American when it says we need to go. But we're not going when they don't need us. We shouldn't be going when they don't need us, because we're putting personnel and equipment at risk. I've scraped my knee and I need some Bactine, I'm showing my age now, Bactine, I don't even think they make it anymore, and a Band-Aid. But you state in here, American Ambulance needs to prioritize levels of emergency medical services, and they do. The EMD system that they utilize is currently version 13 of the Medical Priority Dispatch System, and is an internationally utilized and recognized peer-reviewed medical science-based system of caller interrogation, resource allocation, and call prioritization. And they're regularly updated based on changes to medical science, including utilization of EpiPens, Narcan, compression-only CPR, et cetera.
Let me just respond quickly before you do. We're not suggesting that you move away from American Ambulance.
Oh, I'm not saying that you are, but I'm thinking now with a different hat on, that the headline tomorrow or a byline somewhere is American Ambulance doesn't do this correctly.
Who decides whether the fire department goes? Sometimes it's the American Ambulance. We have some departments here that don't want to go, so they just don't go.
Well, whether they want to go or not is inconsequential. If American calls, and we've got every chief here, so if American calls your fire department, stand up, chief, if you say, oh, I don't care, American call, we're not going. Stand up if you don't go when American calls you. I'm calling you out right now.
You know, I'm sorry that that's how that's read. Because I apologize if that's how that's read. Because what we're saying is, to the best of my knowledge, you have one department that goes on everything. And it's the dispatcher that's determining whether they go.
No, American Ambulance determines who goes, and Rob's here. American Ambulance determines whether or not it's fire department response. If there is a fire department that's buffing calls, I don't know about it,
Okay, well, thank you. It's just contrary to what we were told.
okay?
During the study.
But if there's
And
one
our issue
chief
is
here
not-
that says they don't want to go on a medical, now they may say, listen, we don't need to go to that boo-boo, or we get burnt out because we have a lot of medical calls. Americans there, we're coming, they don't really need us. But there isn't, I don't think there's one chief here that will stand up and say, I'm not going if American Ambulance calls us.
And that's not what we're suggesting.
Okay.
Yeah, just a couple quick piggybacks off that is absolutely, this isn't saying that any of the chiefs said we don't want to go on calls, but some of that feedback does come from the interviews that our consultants had with many members of all of the departments on should we be going on so many calls. That's where some of that discussion came from. By and large, we would be in agreement with anybody who says a fire apparatus needs to go on every EMS call. I think we would be in agreement that that would be the case. It does need to be prioritized. But to your point, some of the statements do come from the interviews that our consultants had with membership.
Okay, well, that may be their opinion, but if their chiefs knew that they were going to refuse to go on a medical call, I don't think they would belong for their department.
Yeah, again, and we're not saying that anybody said we're not going to go on a call. That's not what we're saying. We're just going on the feedback of members.
Okay, just for that, because I'm looking at it from a different perspective now.
If I can just add one thing, because as I did the evaluation of the PSAP, the standing practice of dispatchers are, once they receive a 911 call for a medical emergency, they're supposed to stay on the line. The problem comes in when you have maybe not enough workforce because you don't have a good documentation of how many calls you're coming in. You know, everybody that's in a dispatch center is trying to do the best job that they can. But when you're starting to get a ton of calls and you're trying to listen in, sometimes you'll drop that to answer other 911 calls. And then what happens is that transfers happen to American Ambulance, and then American Ambulance has to recall Norwich PD going, hey, do we have a fire unit en route or not? So that's kind of the process that needs to be a better process going forward. And how you come up with that process is a combination between your PSAP manager, you know, that supervisor that we put in place, American Ambulance, and the fire commissioner and the fire chiefs working in conjunction on how you can best deliver that service.
Another one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, again, tomorrow's headline in the paper is going to be, you state in your report that you recommend that the Norwich Fire Department respond to every structure fire within the city of Norwich with an engine, no matter where it is. So the byline of that is going to be, the volunteers can't get it done. They have to have the city with them. I know you're shaking your head. You don't know Norwich.
I would respectfully disagree, and from this, just from this vantage point, we recommend both ways for.
But you don't say that in here.
No, we do. I don't know the exact page.
Both are in there.
We feel it's better for the citizens of Norwich, both ways, if an engine from the CCD would respond to any report of a structure fire in the whole city. But likewise, we see benefit to the closest volunteer engine responding automatically to a report of a structure fire within the CCD as well. We just feel, especially if you take the recommendation of transferring engine 3 to an EMS response vehicle, that's one less fire engine that's potentially available in CCD. Even though the volunteer agency might take a minute or two more to get out the door, it's still an automatic response that is in motion to replace that engine. So whatever the headline potentially could be, we recommend and we think working together on any report of a structure fire, from paid to volunteer and from volunteer to paid, provides a better service for Norwich.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And in your report, you say that, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, that many of the departments actually attempt to record response times as they respond to emergency scenes. You wrote that in here. Yes?
That's
Many?
accurate.
Right.
That's an actual statement that we heard repeatedly.
So I want to know what fire departments are telling you that en route to an emergency, fire, medical, whatever, said that.
And for the sake of confidentiality and respect, I would not give you that information.
Because I think the
When I
chiefs,
had the interview with you, I did not share what you said.
and I understand that, but
Or
I,
to anyone else, and I would not share that. The people have to be able to speak in confidence. We have no reason to make that up.
well, I didn't say,
And-
I am
and-
not suggesting that you made
and
anything
the
up.
point is-
But I find that outrageous,
Well,
that somebody would say
it's-
that.
It's factual, and we've heard it from enough people, that because the dispatcher has so many things going on in an antiquated system, they're trying to record it for the most accurate. I understand why they're doing that. Because when they call and they say, dispatch says, well, it took you 11 minutes to get out the door, they know it didn't take 11 minutes to get out the door. So they're writing down by looking at their watch when they went out the door. I'm sorry, that's what it is.
Thank you.
Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, round two. First question. Was a formal comparative analysis of response times between the career department and the volunteer departments completed as part of your analysis?
Couldn't
or
do it.
Research?
Because you don't have the data from the volunteers. There's no accurate data. Some of it's handwritten, some of it's their system if they record it, someone on the station might have recorded it, but your dispatcher isn't putting it in CAD. They're choosing to get the emergency people going, God bless them. So no, I can't. Secondly, I can't prove that the unit that got there in 3 minutes was an individual with a portable radio, which is important for a size-up, or was it the mitigation unit? You don't have that data. So you can't make that comparison. I wish you could, because if you could, we would have done it. And believe me, we tried.
Okay, thank you. So second question then. So we know, if I understood it correctly, NFPA 1710 and 1720, the primary difference between the two when it came to response times was that it is unreasonable to expect a volunteer department to be, rolling in there in 4 minutes. I mean, it's just not, it's not fair to expect that.
No.
Right, okay. So can you tell us, so inherently, I guess that means that there's always going to be difference in response times, and we should all understand that and be honest with ourselves about that, right? So, and that's not about good or bad, right? That's just about the way it is, right? When you have a hybrid system like we have. Agreed?
Absolutely.
So my question is, so what impact will the difference in response times have on tactical planning and safety of the initial arriving units during any significant fire event? And the reason why I ask that is because of what the chief just said, is that, it's going to be great to have, staffed career department rolling on every structure fire, right? Because we know, about how long it takes for them to get out of the house and get to anywhere in the city. And we're also going to be essentially expecting the volunteers to roll into the CCD, right? The difference in response times is going to create a tactical planning issue. Agreed?
Absolutely.
So what would the impact of that, of those difference in response times
Well,
due to
first of
tactical
all-
planning? And who would be responsible for it?
Let's go to the NIFR data to find out what percentage are fires and which percentage are actual fires. And believe me, when you have a working fire, you need all hands on deck as soon as you can get. Okay? It's like when you have a full code on an EMS. You could put 5 paramedics to work immediately. So, yes, I would love to be able to prove that through data, but you don't have. And it's not just me. I don't think anyone can produce that for you. But that needs to weigh out. All right? A chief is not hired to take risks. The chief is to articulate to you what the risks might mean to the community. Could you have a major fire tonight where you lose someone? Unfortunately, you could. And I'll tell you, not any one of these chiefs in this room would say to you, I think it would have made a difference if we could have gotten there a minute sooner. And they mean it from their heart. So to answer your question, you want a statistical analysis, give me the data. And I'll give it to you. Because that's what I do. And I'd love to, and you would have it if we had it. I'm not faulting. I think your police chief has done a tremendous thing with the police department, moving them to a joint system. I think he's willing to do the same for fire, but I'm not sure that they're all in agreement that he should do it. So we're not criticizing someone. We're just saying we need to oversee this and say, what's our priorities? Because you're right, we can't do them all at once. What's our priorities? So in short, I can't answer your question because you don't have the data.
No, yes, you did, and that's my second too. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman Nash?
I'm just going to reiterate, my questions are to the council, not to these people. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderwoman Miles?
I have no further questions.
Okay. Alderman Beckenhart?
Okay, so, this has been fun so far. Yeah, so, first I'm going to tell you that I did not really find a lot of big surprises here. Some of the specifics I was surprised about, but, of course, 194 pages, you're going to find a few things that are probably, that you didn't know about. So, but I appreciate the methodology of taking the person that's getting the service into account and making that the priority. So it's something, when dealing with these issues across the board, that needs to be the priority. I don't, above and beyond anything else, we talk about public safety in generic terms, but that has to be the priority, is protecting the public and protecting those that we serve. So if it's not the priority, then we're probably in the wrong business. So with that, so I'll make that point. That as we go on in our deliberations, that needs to be the priority. I believe that thoroughly, and I was very glad to read that was your first thought. So I'm going to start with here. So the issue with response times was brought up. So I'm going to ask, do we basically have two different standards for response, what's considered response times, either for either the career or the volunteer departments?
I'll just say, Chief, out of respect that I'm tired, but not in disrespect to your question.
No problem.
You can't ask the volunteer department to meet the standards of 1710. It can't be.
Oh, no, absolutely, no, I'm not, I am not saying that.
With
So
response time is, of course, it's going to take a volunteer department longer to get up.
No, what I'm saying is, I'm not talking about the number. All right, say it takes, I'll pick on you, Frank, sorry. It takes Yannick, a minute or two longer to get out of the barn than it does the career department. I don't care. All right. Well, I mean, I do care, but I would rather it didn't. But what I'm saying is, when we start taking times, do we have two different standards? So we have car one from the volunteer companies arrives on scene. When you mentioned with the radio, all right, are we counting that as arriving on scene? Or I think you basically spelled it out in here. I think, but I don't think it was particularly clear that a responding apparatus with personnel on board ready to go is...
We called it the mitigation unit.
Yeah, the mitigation. So, which is a proper standard as far as tracking data. I'm just interested in the data, and to see...
Is it important that an officer shows up with a portable? It certainly could be. They're doing a size up. They're doing some critical things where it's...
No, absolutely, I agree.
Right, we all know that's critically important. But we believe, if we're going to compare, because we heard this all the time, our response time is as good as them, okay? its location, it's where the call is, and let's compare apples to apples. What's a mitigating unit? Okay, and so that data is fair. Is that criticizing the volunteers? No, not at all. And that's why there's two different standards. So we suggested that if you're going to look at it, you want to compare it to the mitigation unit. The paramedic unit, the first responder, the fire truck, or whatever the case is.
Okay. I think that answers the question. One thing. All right. HR. I think, we talked a little bit about this because you were there with but the issue, I'm concerned with HR training, in particular for people in management positions. For instance, I'm going to say, so how we're selecting stuff. So the study recommends eliminating votes for membership, promotion, in volunteer companies, even for the fire chief themselves. So I'm gonna just, it's some criticism here for you, but so you say fire commissioner, city manager, and HR get together and do it. I think that's a punt in a way. Can you cite any examples of how, in a hybrid system like we have, in the methodology for which maybe a volunteer fire company chief is selected?
In a number of organizations, a volunteer chief it depends upon whether or not they're going to report to a commissioner or they're going to report to a board. In some cases, they report to a public safety board. So, yeah, I do think they need to have some criteria. Now, does the criteria have to be that they have to have a bachelor's degree and but they still need to have some things, where I have some administration experience. Do I have some, supervisory experience? Do I know how to do budgeting? Do I know how to do some of those types of things? And that can be something that you can do through your staff development of individuals as they go through the ranks. So, for example, we did a department in South Carolina where we actually developed criteria for each rank and said, okay, you need to have at least a couple supervisory courses, you need to have these types of tactical courses and things of that nature. When it comes to the chief, it's the same thing. Now, in this case, I said the commissioner, HR, whether it be the public safety committee, whether it be however the city wants to develop who the hiring committee should be, and whether or not employees do or do not get involved. When we do some fire chief searches, we'll actually have a section where employees can interview the candidates and they give that information to human resources, and it's added to the mix of all the information that you're going to develop. But it should be actual hiring of an individual, not voting for it. Now, some of your departments do not vote for their membership. Some of your departments do already have criteria that employees have to have, and then they're promoted based upon that criteria. So you already have a couple departments that are doing that. But I think when it comes to the chief, it needs to be somebody like the commissioner, HR, public safety committee, mayor, whoever you think should be involved in that, saying that this person should be the chief. Because let's put it bluntly, you're a chief and I'm elected by the people that I'm now going to now supervise. And if I make some bad decisions, or make some decisions that are going to change the organization, and your organization doesn't like it, what are they going to do? They're going to vote you out. So if you have an individual who has this type of, tenure, whether it's a 2 or 3 year contract, whether it's a term of office or something of that nature, that
Well, you recommend basically a lifetime appointment for all practical purposes,
you could.
outside of incompetence,
Yeah, you could, and you'd still be evaluating that chief, basically making sure that they're performing their job duties. And again, some of those standards might be a little bit different than a full-time chief versus a volunteer chief. But, these are folks that are running an operation. They may not be getting paid, but you're running, thousands of dollars worth of pieces of equipment and organizations, and it shouldn't be just because it was my turn and I got voted in next.
Again, can you give me an example of in a hybrid system that you're aware of that, how they or a couple examples of different ways maybe that they do it, that they make that decision.
Well, obviously, it's going to go, first it's going to go to your job description, so therefore.
No, I mean, who makes the hiring decision?
Thank you, I think the department right now, one delay.
Usually what we find, and this is all over the country, in volunteer departments, that the chiefs elected. And usually the chiefs are selected is because they have great interpersonal skills, to be frankly honest with you, because they deal with people. And I truly believe it's probably harder to be a volunteer chief than as a career chief, because you're dealing with a whole bunch of different people that are there for different reasons. So I won't say this happens here, because I didn't see this at all. I'm gonna make a comparison. I want to say this up front. I joined the volunteer fire department. We voted for the chief, we voted for everyone, captains, lieutenants, all the way down. I loved it, because 6 weeks prior to the election, I had more free beer. I had more pretzels and snacks and stuff, and we loved it. Now, that's not happening here. So what do we say when we go in to answer your question? What qualifications should they have? Should they at least be a certified firefighter 2? Should they be an officer 1? Or should they have to get it within a reasonable length of time? Because maybe they're not. These are the things that we think are important for them to reach. And then allow the department to recommend who they think are the candidates that should be assessed. Don't just exclude them and walk in the next day and say, oh, by the way, here's your new chief.
Yeah, I'm not disputing the wisdom of the recommendation or any of that at this point. But I am just looking for an example in the real world of where this kind of model is working.
I'll tell you what, call me tomorrow, and I'll give you the first 30 I can think of.
Okay.
Okay, because it's that simple.
All right, it is working someplace. I mean, that's all.
Just, not to belabor this, but I can give you an example of my volunteer part-time department tenure as chief. It was a mayoral appointment, but it was an application process that was a mayoral appointment approved by the council. And so it could be something like that. Now, I know you probably don't want to get wrapped up in 6 different chief appointments, but that's the type of situation that could work. Or with a commissioner, the commissioner vets that out and goes to you for approval. So there's a couple of examples of how that could work. Would that work for Norwich? That would be for you to decide. But there are definitely models for vetting chiefs and having council approval.
Yeah, I'm not worried about the approval by this council or any other political body. I would want the best person, doing the job personally. And I don't think political bodies are well suited for that kind of thing. But I will say that I'm just concerned that it's a model that could work. That's all.
It works when you set the standard. But I would say this unequivocally. If we found a chief, career or volunteer, that we thought was major problematic, you would know about it in an executive session of what's there. We don't think any of the chiefs are incompetent. We think they're all very good.
Neither do I. I'm not saying that's an issue.
I know you're not. I'm just saying.
I think they're great.
Yeah, this is a hard transition because what are we really voting on? They're like us, they're not different. Okay? I mean, I know organizations that went out and hired contractually in order to change the DNA in the organization. Because we were all male, we were all Caucasian, we were all within a certain age, and we all loved the beer, 6 weeks before. And we finally said, you know what? Our community is diverse. And so went out and hired contractually to bring in diversity. That's never thought of that. We don't know what we don't know. That isn't a negative. If you've been in one organization your whole life, you don't know what you don't know. And sometimes by bringing in the diversity and a reason for doing it, you're the ones that are going to have to defend it.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you again. First, I want to start by, saying I think you put it best when you started, that one of the things that we have to do as council members, kind of digging into this report, is take the politics out. It goes back to what I said the first time, what's best for the individual needing the service, as you said. So there are going to be, of course, politics, of course, brings disagreements, but the other point that I want to make is none of us should be up here worried about what the headlines are tomorrow. Our jobs as elected individuals, when we voted for or against doing this study, was bringing forth ways to do things better, more efficient, and most importantly, what are we doing to help each and every individual in this city? So for me, that's one of the focal points. There are going to be some things, of course, not anyone likes about the report, but I think it pinpoints where we are as a city. There are some critical points. There are some points that we can work on, but most importantly, it gives us a broad way or direction that we have to decide on. So I think we shouldn't be worried about what, the newspaper writes tomorrow. Our number one priority should be, what are we doing for the men and women in uniform, both volunteer and paid, to keep them safe, to provide them opportunities for growth, but most importantly, what are we doing to improve the service? And that's not just fire service. We do this, you should be doing this, of course, with any service, schools, finance, everything. So I just want to make that point. My first question really goes to the part about apparatuses. So I know you gave the schedules and different documentation of it. And you talk about the 49 number, and I know you gave us several examples, and I'm not trying to pinpoint, we need to have this number. But realistically, where should we be falling in?
It's a really difficult question to ask, and we don't have an exact number. I guess if you're pinning me down for a number, it would be the number minus the red, which would probably be 46 or 45 right now. But it's more about the plan. It's about the plan to not duplicate as much and to not put as much on fleet maintenance in the city of Norwich. So I can't give you an exact number other than what you have now minus the red. But yeah, it's about the long-term global view of how you're going to handle apparatus across the whole city of Norwich.
Excellent. Now, one of the things, and I will say, it's one of the questions I asked. When you give the recommendation of an engine from the closest volunteer department or the paid department responding to structure fires, does that help? One, it, of course, would give some departments more experience and exposure to incidents occurring, but also does that help us with the mutual aid by any chance? Or would that still need to be something that's a robust area to work on?
That's a large area to work on, and that's a deeper answer, because is it mutual aid within the same city? I guess you might get different answers depending on who you talk to. But to your point, number one, it's providing a better service for that person's house might be on fire, and absolutely it's going to potentially give some activity to those who might not get that real world activity as much. But that doesn't match that we're getting vehicles potentially on the road and more vehicles to a fire quicker. Hope that answered your question.
Nope, that totally answers it. Thank you.
Alderwoman Gould.
Okay. So two things. Number one, I do care about the headline tomorrow because I want the headline to be accurate. And I don't want the headline to be disparaging to any of the agencies that serve the city of Norwich. I don't want it to be negative about the police department, the fire department, American Ambulance. That's why I care about what the headline is tomorrow. That being said, and I'm going to go back to what you were discussing about human resources, that the city of Norwich is a unique place. And we have a long and honored tradition of volunteer firefighting. Over 100 years. And we continue to have strong membership of dedicated individuals willing to serve the community that they live in. And we may be the exception to the rule in what's happening across the country as people are leaving or moving away from volunteering in their communities. We are also fortunate that the chiefs that we have sitting in this room have, could be 100 years of combined service to the city of Norwich. Those leaders in the command positions who have come through the ranks of their department, who are professional and who are committed to providing the best service necessary to mitigate whatever emergency their department responds to. And I know that they can work autonomously and they can work collectively with other departments because their goal is to have the very best outcome for anybody who's involved. But I want to say something because I know about it personally, that chiefs, whether you write their name on a secret ballot or raise your hand, are not selected in the city of Norwich because they like them best. I've seen chiefs go because their department saw the big picture and said, oh, we like ABC, he's a great guy, but he stinks as our chief, or he stinks as our lieutenant, or he stinks as our captain. And as much as we like him, and we go out and we socialize with him, we have beer, we go to picnic, we don't have faith in him to lead us. We may be an anomaly here in the city, and I've been in the department 18 years. We don't pick chiefs based on how much we like them, or how great their wives bake cookies, or how much pasta they bring to a dinner. We pick our chiefs and our lieutenants and our captain, all the way down to our recording secretary, by who's going to do the best job and be the best representative. So when they go somewhere and say, I'm the recording secretary of my department, they're putting their best foot forward. I don't believe that we would ever pick a chief or a recording secretary because we like him or her best. It doesn't happen here in the city of Norwich. It may happen in Podunk or in big cities. It really doesn't happen here. You'd have to spend a month here and see what goes on. But we pick our leaders because we have confidence and respect that they will lead us and they would never put us in harm's way. Despite the fact that we're running into a burning building when everyone else is running out, they lead us because we believe, we trust, we know that they do the very best job.
Thank you for your comment. Let me throw some kudos out to your city manager. Every one of our consultants got up at 3 o'clock this morning so we could be here at 4 o'clock to sit down with the press and allow them to ask us anything they wanted to ask. And I think that is tremendous leadership. And you cannot control what they're going to say. I'm sorry. You can't. What you have in front of you is a book of opportunities. If none of the opportunities match what you think needs to occur, don't change. Don't change. But I think that book of opportunities is just that. Some real opportunities for the city to integrate the departments and become a unified, taking the expertise, whether you're volunteer or career, doesn't matter. So you're gonna have to choose. You might go through the recommendation and say, they're all terrible. We're unique. In fact, you know, we hear that quite a bit. But we respect your decision. That line isn't ours, it's yours. So you take a report, you go through, and if everything you read on page 31 or 36, and I'll read this paragraph, somehow if you take it, it's negative, then don't do it, because you don't have a problem. We can only tell you that we came in with our horse in the race of what was best for the people needing the service. And we listened, and we listened, and we try to learn the cultures. You have 5 volunteer fire chiefs that are extremely different people. Is that good or bad? No. But they're all professional, and they do their job. So if none of what we said applies, don't do it. But I think there's things in that report that you might want to look at. And I respect your opinion, because you're going to make the final decision, not me.
Alderman DeLucia.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. So just quickly, 2 things that were spoken about tonight that I would like to address. So just so that everybody from the consultant group understands that I am not only a member of the Public Safety Committee, I'm the chair of the Public Safety Committee. So on the issue of departments being called to medical calls and the strife that was kind of embedded in that, I can tell you that it was only 2 or 3 public safety meetings ago where a chief, I won't say who it was, it doesn't matter, raised the issue of the number of times his department was being dispatched to medical calls where they may not have been necessary. That chief and Rob from American Ambulance had a conversation afterwards. They worked it out. I know that Tracy has had conversations with American Ambulance with the number of those calls, and they work it out. So it is certainly not a broken system. When the departments feel like it is becoming unsustainable to them, they work it out. Okay, it might be raised at public safety, but they sit down or they get on the phone and they work it out. So I don't want the community to think that we have an EMS response issue. We do not. Secondly, I'm going to say that you had to have been living under a rock for the last 35 years if you don't think that there is strife in the fire service in the city of Norwich. There is. Because if there wasn't, we wouldn't have meetings that are going all the way to the mayor's office and the city manager's office because of a sticker that some firefighter was wearing on his radio case. We wouldn't have had a meeting that went all the way to the mayor's office and all the way to the city manager's office over a certain department being unhappy with their assignment at a major fire down in Greenville. Okay, these are the kinds of things that have just propagated through the system, and they need to come to an end. It's the reason why we're all talking about this tonight. It's the reason why we commissioned, one of the reasons why we commissioned this study. Having said that, my questions are this. On page 60 in the report, there's a table number 13. It says, it's titled the NFPA 1720 4.3.2, Staffing and Response Time. And I wonder, where does Norwich fall on that table?
Microphone, please.
It could fall all over, depending on 1720 says, what's the population within the square mile? Because that dictates how many people you need, all the way out to greater than 8 miles, I think, or something. I'm going by memory, that can be dangerous. So you're all over that table. And I think the volunteer departments don't have the small enough district that basically we can handle it all the same. So It's going to change, and it's changing because that's the way it's designed. If it takes you longer to get there, you might need more people. You might need more resources. You might need more water. So to answer your question, you're all over that chart, as you should be, Cliff.
Okay, fair enough, thank you. And you just touched on my second question. So if that is the case, and we are going to be directing our paid department to roll at least an engine on automatic assignment to every structure fire in the TCD, how did you arrive at reducing the NFD force by 7 FTEs?
Did we actually put 7? I thought it was 4.
Report mentioned 7.
Okay. I'll let you address the staffing, because that's a very complex question, as you will. If you want to take standards, if you want to adopt 1710, I'll tell you right now, you don't have enough people on duty to respond to a working structure fire in a 2,000 square foot home in your city. Because if you raise the ladder, you need 17, and you don't have 17 on duty. So if you want to meet that entirely, hire more. Or let's integrate all the services we have to get that number.
I totally agree, but the 7 people, we'd be taking an engine and reassigning 2 of the 3 people on that engine to an EMS squad, let's call it, right? The 3rd person off of that engine would go to Greenville, all right? So there's 3 people that are just gonna be reassigned, right? But then the remaining 4 people, all right, your report says through attrition, those positions would be eliminated, okay? And so,
Real quick, just let me jump in here.
How do we do both,
Kind of
right?
talking 2 different things here. You're talking daily staffing versus overall employee numbers. So that might be what's confusing it here a little bit. They're really independent of each other. Reassigning engine 3 and potentially putting one at Greenville to make a 4-man engine company preserves the daily staffing that's in the contract. So that's a separate issue. So that's 13 per platoon. That's what it is. That's in the contract. The 4 FTEs that we're talking about come into play is if you consider one of 2 things, really. One would be not placing that extra body on Greenville Engine 2 per platoon. But again, that's a negotiable item. We can't tell you to do that. That's a negotiable item, because that would require daily platoon staffing to fall to 12. And it's in the contract as 13. So that would require negotiation. The other way would be to alter platoons to 3 instead of 4, 24/48, on 1 shift, off 2, and allow for platoons of 16. 3 times 16, 3 platoons of 16 is 48. You currently have 52 operational staff. So that's a decrease of 4. Of course, like we mentioned numerous times, by attrition. We don't see a major financial issue to warrant anything other than attrition. Does that clear it up a little bit for you? It's a couple independent things of each other, depending on how you negotiate. With the local.
absolutely. I'm just trying to bend my brain around that the city or the career department will be rolling into the TCD more often, because it would be an automatic assignment to any structure fire, call for a structure fire, right? And yet we would be reducing overall staff, even through attrition.
Well, we look at it as working together better as well, is how we look at it. And I don't have an exact numbers in front of me, but I'm guessing it's not every day that there's a report of a structure fire. So it's kind of taking all aspects into consideration of just working together better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we're really not proposing lowering daily staffing unless that's what the agreement comes to between the city and the local. We're just coming to an agreement here or a proposal on how to actually work together a little bit better with what you have. So that's kind of what we're looking for. And so this is independent of an NFPA standard. We're not, that's why they weren't really discussed in the same exact category. We're not talking NFPA standards with the discussion of altering your daily staffing or altering the assignments for the daily staffing.
Right, and I'm not trying to, take you in two directions and trip you up, all right? What I'm saying is that I look at this chart, it talks about the response times, and I'm asking, how do we hit those response times, right? And increase call volume, hopefully not by a lot, because structure fires shouldn't happen every day, otherwise we got other problems, right? Okay, but, but response times are a function of how many people and how many pieces of apparatus you have to send to a scene.
Yeah, and I guess our stance would be that your response times are going to improve. Your response times across the city are going to improve. And that's kind of what we're looking at, working together better and potentially getting a rig to a fire scene sooner, no matter which patch is on the shoulder of that firefighter. So
I agree.
So that's the global view of what we're looking at with, again, sorry to sound like a broken record, but just working together a little bit better. That's what it all boils down to.
Right, and I'm not trying to poke holes in, just trying to completely understand. Yep. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Alderman Bickler.
Go on back up. Wouldn't the 2448 create automatic overtime built into the schedule?
I'm surprised it took 2 hours to get to this discussion, right? So this is...
That's why they pay me the big bucks here,
Right. So, again, not to sound like a broken record, but it comes down to what the city negotiates with the local. There are
You're never going to get an FLSA exemption. I mean, that's
right.
basically,
Well,
that's not
so
gonna
there are numerous models available, is all we could say. And again, the study could have been 350 pages if it included presenting all the different potential staffing options. But there are numerous models nationwide of this rotation system with. Because it all comes down to what the city negotiates with time off, with a Kelly Day system. That's a really technical term that many of you may have not heard of, but it's a way to drop those hours in a 28-day work cycle to not hit FLSA every work cycle. So in conjunction with vacation days available, a Kelly Day system. A Kelly Day system, for real quick layman's terms, is essentially a day off for a firefighter every cycle, however you determine it. Some cycles are every 7th shift off, platoon, 8th platoon, 9th platoon, in an effort to drop that hours worked in a 28-day cycle.
See,
So
that makes a little more sense.
what I'm
So
getting
it
at.
wouldn't be a straight 2448 then, and that's
No,
your
it never. I
example.
mean, it never is. I worked at 2448, not to bring my battle stories together, but there are numerous models to integrate time off within the schedule. So yeah, absolutely, there are ways to eliminate that hours worked in a 28-day cycle.
Okay, thank you.
The other thing too to look at is, he's kind of mentioned it because I'm the FLSA guru, there is hours worked versus hours paid. And right now I don't remember what you have, but if you have hours worked, you're actually.
Probably also in the CBA, I'm sure.
Yeah, right, exactly. And versus taking that and saying, okay, I'm still going to be paid for sick time, but the sick time is not going to count towards overtime. That will help reduce it. There's a number of studies that we've done where we looked at hours worked, hours paid for sick leave. And I took 3 or 4 employees throughout the entire organization, tried to find folks that didn't have a high amount of sick leave so I wasn't skewing it. And if you just reduced sick leave to hours worked versus hours paid, you're talking about $3,000 or $4,000 per employee per year that you're going to reduce your overtime by. And the employee is really not that affected unless, of course, they take a lot of sick leave. So there are ways in which you can look at, are you a 7-day cycle? Are you a 28-day cycle? All those things that can kind of reduce that over time. But you're absolutely right. In a 28-day cycle, 27-day cycle, you will be working overtime just by working your hours.
Right.
Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. Only question that I have would be going back to the fire commissioner situation. So when we would be talking the hiring of this individual, it would be under the direction of the city manager and the HR director? Or would it be the city manager with a recommendation to the council?
We believe that it reports to the city manager.
I'm not asking about the reporting, the hiring process
The hiring
to get there.
would be that the city manager could oversee, get input from everyone, and then the council's going to decide whether they support his decision or not. I think he probably makes recommendations about your police chief and your public works director, does he not?
Those are his responsibility.
Those are what?
If he appoints the city police chief, that's his.
Then what? Yeah, follow whatever, however fits in. I apologize that I don't know.
That's okay.
Thank you. That's all that I have. Thank you.
Alderman Gould.
I'm just gonna, one more comment, just for the record, the city all uses the same SCBA.
Understood on that. Please understand that was just an example. That was just one example of a broader topic of equipment standardization. So yes, thank you for pointing that out. That was just a kind of an old school example that is typical of the fire service.
Alderman DeLucia.
Yeah, I really just have one more question on the topic of apparatus replacement. Once we get back through the whole, let's say we get through the whole matrix and we get down to our fighting weight, so to speak, the acquisition of new apparatus. And I'm going to give it a hypothetical because I know there's a lot of moving parts to this. So my hypothetical is this: if we were to have a fire commissioner, and part of that person's job would be to have, I know you guys said quarterly, I'd like it to be monthly meetings with when you guys referred to board, I didn't think that as us, I thought that as the chiefs. Okay, so like the chiefs, we'd have the fire commissioner and the chiefs commission, and they meet monthly. And the topic that they're working on is replacing an apparatus, or one or two, let's say, okay? Should that group write a single specification for each type of apparatus and say to us, this is what you need to authorize funds to buy? So, because he talked about the training on like pieces of equipment and operating on like pieces of equipment. I'm getting it all the way to purchasing like pieces of equipment. Would that be your recommendation, that we get to one spec for every type of apparatus, and the city's purchasing agent says, we're putting this out to bid, this is what a fire, this is what an engine tanker looks like is in the city of Norwich. This is what a ladder truck looks like in the city of Norwich. And if that's what you need, that's what you're getting.
I don't have a fancy answer other than yes.
Okay.
Yes, standardization of equipment across Norwich.
Closed-ended questions, I love them. Thank you very much. That's all.
Alderman Bettencourt.
I touched on about EMS. First, I'm going to preface this by saying I know nothing about EMS calls other than getting the fire department there. I will tell you right now. So you mentioned the need to prioritize, in quotes here, prioritize levels of EMS needed with national codes in parentheses. So I'm going to plead ignorance here, and I'm going to ask specifically, what does that mean exactly? And hang on, in the context of, how many of these calls are we responding to that we really don't need to respond to? And leave it there.
That's an interesting question, because you see, with all due respect, if you fall down and break your ankle, it's not really an emergency. But if I fall down and break mine, it is.
Yeah, right.
So it's a matter of perspective of where you go. I'm disappointed that our report came out that it somehow reflected negatively on the ambulance service, because we don't think that at all.
I do not believe it did. It just, stating some
it could,
issues that we need to
people
work
could
on.
read it that way, and
Yeah.
I apologize that it came out that way, because it's not our intention. But right now, we believe there's a department that goes at everyone. And we think the ambulance service has the Alpha, Beta, Charlie, Delta, where are you at, the ambulance person? You have the criteria, it's national. And that's really the standard. If this comes in as a person with chest pains, difficulty breathing, that's a Delta call. That means the ambulance goes and the fire department goes, period. Someone calls and says, I haven't been feeling good for the last 4 days, and you don't know over the phone. That's why I really want to go back to dispatch and say, this is why we think there needs to be a professional dispatcher sitting there, because they're trained to do that. Not that the police are not smart and do it, but the police officers trained for something else. Firemen's trained for something else. And what we hear constantly, all over the country, when you have dispatch in the police department as well, all the priorities, police department, we're second fiddles. We don't count. No. Dispatchers know how to get that information. So we think that's critical. So I don't think you should be running on everything. Okay? And that can be determined by the ambulance service that I'm pretty sure probably prioritizes the calls and goes through a criteria, whether, I don't know if you're using a card system or a computer system, of telling you when you do EMD, correct? Yeah, emergency medical dispatching. They deal with us. This is what they do on a daily thing. So I don't think a fire chief should be saying, well, we're just going to go on everything. Okay. Why? Maybe you've never heard a citizen complain that says, gee, my uncle, hurt his knee and a fire truck showed up and an ambulance showed up and 2 police cars showed up and that's a waste of taxpayers' money. There's no guarantee, okay? I've gone on emergency calls for my baby's not breathing and it was a dog. Okay? But to that person, that was critical. So I think you've got a very good ambulance service. I think they've got a process. Believe me, for all the running they do, they know how to prioritize. I don't think the chiefs, and if you throw a big EMS and all the volunteer chiefs, you're going to have problems with responses. I mean, just the number.
I listen to a scanner a good part of the day, and I know there's repeat tones and stuff, and it's
and by the
a
same
problem.
token, I don't see how you justify running a ladder truck or an engine on something else when it can be done a lot cheaper, because you can't abandon the patient. If you get there first, I don't care what's burning, you can't abandon that patient until the ambulance gets there. So I don't know. The expertise is there. I think it just needs someone to oversee the whole thing and say, this is the criteria we're going to use. And you know what? It might be different for the fire department than it is the volunteers. Because right now, that's what we have to do.
Why would it be different for I'm talking about from the person getting the service, why would it be different for the career versus the volunteer?
You have people on duty, and you have people that are responding, and are they burning out? This is what your data tells you. How many people come on the calls? I just did a study in the state where 12% of their calls, emergency calls, and they had 85% EMS. They just didn't go on. Phoned it 3 times, nobody came. What did you do? Nothing? Who went? Don't know. So I think you're gonna have to look at it differently and work into it understandably that the career are there and they might be going out faster or a little different criteria. You have all your Delta calls, classification, yeah, they show. But you might want to look at it differently. I don't know. That's something I sit down and talk about. But you got an ambulance service that does it every day.
No, I mean, I'm happy with American. I mean, I've certainly supported renewing the contracts before and the whole 9 yards, but and there's a long history of how we got there with American too, you know, to be considered, you know, certainly, you know, I'm aware of that too, so. And it's getting late, folks, so I'm gonna shut the heck up. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Wilson.
I'm all set, thank you.
Any remaining? Alderman Delucia.
I don't have any more questions. I'm going to keep this brief. But I have a copy of the original resolution that authorized the study. And obviously, we compared your work product to the resolution. You hit every single thing that we put in there and went even beyond that. I would like to thank you for your innovative approach and solutions, because you gave us a lot to think about and many things that we hadn't thought of. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You got a great foundation. You got a great foundation. To be very proud.
Okay, I'm going to take a shot. I tried to facilitate for all my members, and I'm not going to be long. When I look at this whole study, and I will tell you, I looked at all the other studies over time. I think this is the best product because it's addressing looking forward, and it's looking to unite everybody, and I really like those goals. It places the patient or prospective patient number one. But for something like this to work, it's going to take buy-in by everybody. And I worry that whether it's done by negotiation or done by resolution or done by ordinance or not touched at all, which I think is a way to describe, there are some things in this report I wouldn't touch. And I know what they are for myself personally. I'm only speaking for myself. But there are some things in here that if they're not addressed, in the 2448 versus the 2472, which we have now, it's my understanding that if we went to the 2448, we would be saving the taxpayer some money in the same process as we're looking to better the system and protect all our first responders at the same time. My understanding that would also, not totally, but largely eliminate callback provisions or the need for them, where you're bringing someone in at time and a half when you have a volunteer department right there down the road who can and would respond. So you are addressing some pretty heavy issues here, and I appreciate that very much, but where do we do if not everyone buys in? And that's a general question, but it's an important question. How do we continue moving forward, for example, if negotiations don't result in that 2448?
Then you begin to compromise and work towards the future of what it's going to look like. And I think the gentleman at the end of the table said it well, and he said they're so integrated. You know, you just can't pull one out and say, we're going to do this or that. There's no magic answer. But that's why, believe me, if you have any idea how hard it was for me to say, yes, I'm going to recommend a commissioner, which was 180 degrees from what I normally say, it was because truly that's what this community needs, this city needs, as a neutral party to put all these good aspects together. Not one's better than the other, but we don't all have to duplicate everything. So, you know, you're not going to get everything. That's what negotiations is called.
Right.
So you deal with what the cards you have. And let's face it, the value you're getting from your volunteers is fantastic.
It's priceless.
Absolutely fantastic.
Combined, it's over 500 years of service. The longevity that's here is second to none except for one department. Yannick, over almost 175 years continued service. There's only one other department longer than that in the whole nation. Taffel's over 105 coming up, I believe, in 2022, and so forth. Yeah. And that doesn't take away from Central at all.
No, I think you have a broken opportunity.
Yep.
I'm broken record, I apologize.
Yep.
You can be silent.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we're still in a meeting, so I would ask that members of council accept the recommendation that this be referred to the Public Safety Committee. Alderman Bettencourt, is there a second? Alderman DeLucia. Roll call, please.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes?
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Nash?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Bettencourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
That's 7-0.
Thank you. Motion passes 7-0. Refer to Public Safety.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I need to ask to be excused. I do have to go to work in a few hours, and I need to get prepared.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Sorry.
City Manager's report.
Thank you. This is the city manager's report for February 16th, 2021. Meetings attended via conference call or video were weekly. Governor Lamont updates and the state budget overview. State representatives and legislators, Southeast Council of Governments, Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, NPU coordination meeting, Region 4 Emergency Support Plan, Department of Health COVID-19 updates, NCDC Director Search Committee, and Passport to Norwich update. As of Friday, February 12th, Norwich Public Works has responded to 5 winter weather events over the last 3 weeks. The most notable storm started, thank you. The most notable storm started the morning of February 1st with cleanup lasting through the night and snow accumulations of over 1 foot. NPW was assisted by 1 plow driver from NPU during the major storm event. The storm on Super Bowl Sunday produced about 7 inches of snow. While the cost of responding to these 5 storms was significant, about $150,000, it was budgeted for. The major part of the expense is the salt to treat the roads. To date, over 1,800 tons of salt have been used this winter. The annual average is about 2,500 tons. Depending on what happens over the next month, we should be in a satisfactory position from a budgetary standpoint, as long as we don't have an extraordinary amount of storm events going forward. NPW has completed 4 days of snow removal from downtown and Greenville streets over the last 2 weeks. This cleanup makes the streets safer for both vehicles and pedestrians and have been done on a regular time, incurring no additional overtime costs. The City of Norwich Office of Community Development has received a $219,000 in special CDBG funds from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, acronym CARES Act, for preparing for and responding to COVID-19. Information for the Small Business Grant, SBG, assistance to the city's Facebook and Community Development Office website, or call them directly at 860-823-3770 for more information. Norwich Human Services has posted instructions on its webpage on how to register for a vaccination through the VAMS, which is the Vaccine Administration Management System. The Recreation Department will be resuming small group activities starting February 16th in the Recreation Hall, where everyone will be required to wear masks. A United Way mobile food pantry distribution is being sponsored in memory of Jason Vincent by Mayor Peter Nystrom and Linda Nystrom, along with Jason's friends and family. The event will be held February 25th at the Rose City Senior Center from 3:30 to 5 p.m. Thank you to them and the volunteers that are making this event possible. The goal is to serve 400 families facing hunger in our community. And that concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you. Are there questions of the city manager? Yes, Alderman Wilson.
So this is more so, not a question for the city manager, but you may be able to answer it, Mayor. First, I want to say I appreciate the continued work on getting the grant money through the CDBG funding that we got for small businesses. The only question I have, and I know several businesses have reached out as far as assistance with filling out the paperwork, and I know I've referred some of them to your office. Just kind of more so for the record for individuals to know, who can they reach out to for assistance with making sure that they are filling out the application and the necessary information correctly?
There's assistance available through the Community Development Office. Sector is also providing financial assistance. If a business has issues they can't address in the application, they can reach out to Sector itself. My office can provide those contacts. NCDC, either Devin Schleit or Fawn Walker, who's there, who came back to assist us with the absence of Jason. At NCDC, they're there to help as well. The goal is to make it as non-threatening and easy as possible for the businesses to apply. And those are really the contacts. Again, they call me direct. I'll help them myself. I mean, whatever we can do to help the businesses or feed our families, we just got to get it done. That's the goal.
Excellent. Thank you. I mean, for me, you said it best, is the accessibility to making sure that they get these opportunities. The only other question that I have is, I know on our webpage, I know we have PPP loan availability and things of that sort. Is there any way on the city page where we have all the information for vaccines and things of that sort, we can put those informations or links for individuals to be able to reach out to those contacts? Again, this is for me looking at the bigger picture of helping those that may need the assistance business-wise, and being able to make it a one centralized location where they can click and see all the opportunities. So that's all that I have. Thank you.
To the issue of vaccines, United Community Family Services is providing vaccines. The Senior Center is hosting vaccine opportunities as well, generally 2 times a week, although next week, I believe it's just 1 time.
Uncas Health District.
Uncas Health District is coordinating those as well. We're trying to utilize and marshal all our resources together, but it starts with Uncas Health, UCFS. They have multiple sites, not just in Norwich as well. And we're encouraging everyone who's eligible to get a vaccination to get it when they can, to make the appointment. I know that our senior citizen director, Mike Wallach, and his staff are going 100 miles an hour, whatever, to help people fill out the applications, achieve a patient portal, to get everyone registered, to follow up, to make sure they get to their appointments. Leanne Gomes is just going bonkers as well, helping to coordinate all of what I just described, and more so with the people in her staff. We're all working as one team, and that's the beauty of this, what's going on here. There's no pride in authorship. We all are responsible to do that, and everybody is just lifting to make sure it happens. And it's very encouraging to see that. DOD is hosting vaccinations as well as hosting testing. Anything we can do to make it better and safer, we're doing it.
Citizen comment on resolutions.
I declare citizen comment on resolutions to be open. You can call in at 860-215-8140, conference ID 403-8191. with the pound key. Again, if you'd like to call in on citizen comment on the one resolution, it's 860-215-8140, conference ID 403-8191, and the pound key. Is someone there? Okay.
Good evening, it's Marvin Cerruto, 100 Star Street, Norwich, Connecticut, the United States of America. I would just like to say that I stuck with this meeting tonight because I actually care about this town, and I'm glad you do also. And I am going to speak on all the resolutions tonight, which there is one, and I'm in favor of this resolution. The history of Norwich is extremely important, and I don't know how much more I can express this to people. You have no idea what it was like to be 10 years old, riding around on your bike in this town and experiencing the history of this town. But I remember that, and I want others to remember that. And that's my story. I'm sticking to it. And oh, by the way, I was trained as a fireman, you know, and you haven't lived until you've been in a main lube oil fire on a submarine 200 feet at the Arctic Circle. God bless y'all.
Thank you. The line is still open, 860-215-8140, conference ID 403-8191, and pound key. Again, conference ID is 403-8191. Enter that in and a pound key after you dial 860-215-8140. Seeing as there are no other callers, I declare citizen comment closed.
Resolution number 1, relative to city manager entering into an agreement for the CLG Historic Preservation Enhancement Grant.
Entertain a motion, please, to bring this forward. Alderwoman Miles, second by Alderwoman Gould. Is there discussion? Seeing none, roll call, please.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Betancourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
That's 6-0.
Motion passes 6-0. Entertain a motion to
Motion
adjourn.
to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Alderwoman Gould, second by Alderman Wilson. Roll call.
Alderman DeLucia?
Yes.
Alderwoman Miles?
Yes.
Alderman Wilson?
Yes.
Alderwoman Gould?
Yes.
President Pro Tem Betancourt?
Yes.
Mayor Nystrom?
Yes.
That's 6-0.
Good night.
Motion passes 6-0. We are adjourned. Thank you all for your patience.